across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Sunday morning. There's loads to discuss. We're going to talk to the Liberal Democrats, we're going to talk to the Conservatives as well. Helen Whately, who is the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. Lots of pensions questions yesterday. Reem Abraham, you may remember from the IEA, the Institute of Economic Affairs. She annoyed a lot of pensioners. If you have questions about the WASPy women, if you have questions about benefits, anything you want to put to the Conservatives, you let me know. 0344 499 1000. Helen Whately's coming up in a few minutes' time, as is Christine Jardine from the Liberal Democrats. We'll talk too about the lies that were told by West Midlands Police about Maccabi Tel Aviv. There's an apology that has gone into Parliament because of the lies, yes, mistruths told by the Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, where he said the Jewish groups didn't want Maccabi Tel Aviv fans there in Birmingham for the Aston Villa match. That is an absolute scandal. Another scandal we're talking about is David Lammy, Calamity Lammy himself, telling Porkies as well about rape statistics. He says that 60% of people withdraw from rape trials. Actually, it's more like 8% who withdraw from the actual criminal process after charges are brought. A lot of people make complaints and then drop them, but the truth is very different to what David Lammy said on Sky News, and we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about dangerous terrorists, 170 of them, that cannot be booted out of this country. We are forced, you and I, to pay our taxpayers' money to monitor these scumbags, and guess what? We can't get rid of them. Why? Well, you'll never guess. It's the European Convention of Human Rights. There it is again. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you want to get your point across here on Talk this morning. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock, and as always, we'll put as many calls, text, tweets and voice notes on the air. 0344 499 1000. You can ring me on that number, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can send me a voice note. Keep it to less than a minute, please. We listen to them all. We play out as many as we can. You can also text me 87222. You can send me a tweet at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Stephen Millings in Belfast has already been in touch and says Northern Ireland have had jury-free trials for decades. Why no mention of them? What are the UK afraid of? Well, certainly those Diplock trials are something we can talk about in that debate, and Stephen, I'm happy to do that. So keep your messages coming in. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. So much to talk about this morning, and I really feel very strongly about the dozens of extremists deemed a threat to national security facing 24/7 monitoring. We've got to pay for it. The Home Office does it through the police, through counter-terror police. We've got to pay for it as taxpayers. Why? Because human rights laws are preventing their deportation. Let's talk to Christine Jardine, the Liberal Democrat MP, about all the news stories that are making the headlines today. Christine, you're very welcome to the programme. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. What do you think it says that 170 foreign nationals are living under the UK, under restrictions in the UK? They're considered dangerous enough to be restricted, but we can't get rid of them. Surely this is a failure of asylum policy.
Well, it's a departmental failure yet again. We've seen so much of it in the last couple of years, and I think what we have to do is look at just exactly why departments are doing this and why they're so incompetent. I don't believe that it's impossible to get rid of terrorists or criminals. I think it's incompetence which is not allowing it to happen.
But it's made more difficult, is it not, Christine, by being members of the European Convention of Human Rights? The Reform UK want to get out of that. The Conservatives want to get out of it. I don't think your party does.
No, of course we don't. Because the ECHR protects your rights and my rights. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Does it need change? Does it need reformed in some way? Yes, of course it does. And
how are you going to do that, though? It's realistically, Christine, how are we going to reform something that loads of... Let me just ask the question. How are we going to reform something that loads of different countries are part of and that is so embedded into our law, not just European law, but British law as well?
Funnily enough, I was just about to tell you and you interrupted me.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm getting used to it, Peter. What we should be doing is working with the ECHR. We should be working with the other countries to come up with solutions which suit. Now, you say it's embedded in all of these different countries. Well, the same thing is embedded in all of these different countries, the protection of human rights. And what we do is we ensure that we are working to it properly. And what we have is incompetence in our asylum system. We have incompetence in the department. That is the root cause. It's important. We set up the ECHR, and it's important that if we are going to protect the values that we value, the things that we value, the rights that we value, that we protect them through the ECHR. And that means we should be constantly reviewing its weaknesses and its strengths and where we move forward. We shouldn't be sitting in the 1940s or the 1950s. We should be reviewing it, but we shouldn't leave it because it needs us to lead it. We should be leading on it now.
Are they going to actually listen to us, Christine?
Well, you said Nigel Farage wants to leave. And if I was sitting at home listening now, I'd say, yes, Nigel Farage, he's the chap who told us it would be such a good idea to leave the European Union that has now cost our economy an estimated £90 billion.
That was a democratic vote, though. Okay, well, let's take that. Let's take that. Okay.
Completely wrong on that.
Okay, let's take that, Christine. Let's take what you're saying there and saying we need to lead when it comes to reforming the ECHR. I mean, David Cameron tried to reform the EU. I know the ECHR is different and involves other countries and has been around longer than the EU, but David Cameron tried to reform the EU in some way. That didn't work. Then he promised a Brexit referendum, and it led to consequences which you don't like. How are the other European countries and other countries more generally going to listen to us when we say, let's reform something? It may work for them, but it isn't working for us, is it?
Hang on. You said I don't like it. What I said was it's cost the economy 90.
Well, you don't like, I think it's fair to say you don't like Brexit,
like
Christine.
That. I think increasingly talking to people in this country who voted for Brexit feel let down and misled about what it would actually mean. And we're in the same situation again with the ECHR. People want to know what the actual situation is. They don't want misled again. They don't want to listen to Farage and his overblown promises and his...
I mean, he would argue, Christine.
He would argue that he got it right.
You got to ask me. You got to let me ask a question, Christine. Farage would argue that actually, if he'd been in charge, Brexit would have been done properly and things would have been done differently. Instead, it was done under the Conservatives that he doesn't like. His view is let him do the European Convention of Human Rights withdrawal and make it work for Britain.
It wouldn't work for Britain is the problem. It wouldn't work for Britain. It wouldn't work for any other country. We have to do what is best for us. And what is best for us is to stay in the ECHR and lead it and reform it. That would have been best for us in Europe, to lead it, reform it, change it, work with people. Instead of which, we've cut ourselves off and we are now the victims of that isolation in economic terms. And we're having to rebuild, and it's costing people jobs, it's costing people money, it's costing us a cost of living crisis. If we leave the ECHR, we will do exactly the same thing about human rights. It will cost us again. We know from experience of Brexit that it's not a good idea to just throw your toys out of the pram and leave. You reform from inside, you make it better.
Okay. Baroness Faulkner is a Labour grandee. She's the former head of the European Convention. She's not the former head of European anything. She's the former head of the Human Rights and Equality Commission. Apologies. I clearly need a cup of tea. But listen, she has said yesterday that she believes that Labour have let down women. I would just want to hear what Pat McFadden, who is the Work and Pensions Secretary, has been saying this morning. He has been on Sky News. Let's just hear what Pat McFadden has been saying.
The government has to do is to give guidance not to one organisation but to the whole of society about how this Supreme Court judgment is implemented. And the bottom line is the Supreme Court judgment will be implemented. That will mean change, and the guidance will advise organisations how they should do it.
How soon?
Well, I can't give you a date.
Weeks, months?
We'll get it right rather than giving an arbitrary date.
So one of the criticisms that Baroness Faulkner made of Labour, of the party, she grew up with and fought alongside people like Harriet Harman, was that this Supreme Court judgment hasn't been implemented properly, and also in regard to rape gangs and the inquiry that's been announced, that's moving far too slowly. Do you agree with her, Christine Jardine?
No, I was on the Women and Equality Select Committee that questioned Baroness Faulkner about the interim guidance, which has now been taken down from the website. And what became abundantly clear in that was that they had oversimplified, if you like, the actual judgment. Is far more complicated, and it's far more difficult to put into simple terms and to make workable along with existing legislation like the GRR Act and the Equalities Act. It's far more difficult than that interim guidance led everyone to believe. It also didn't take account of things like the privacy protections that we have under GDPR, and there was some legal advice which contradicted one or two things which the EHRC had said, and I sympathise, all these acronyms with the same letters and different.
No, I know what you mean. But when it comes to the more fundamental point, Christine, of letting down women, especially when it comes to the rape gangs inquiry, do you think that's a reasonable criticism of Labour?
No, I don't. I think what Labour are trying to do, and I'm not a member of the Labour Party, and I don't sympathise entirely with the delay, but I do think that what they are trying to do is come up with a solution which is fair to everyone. Guidance which allows people to go ahead and live their lives. Everybody with concerns, women, the trans community, it allows everyone to live easily their lives without the sort of problems that the interim guidance in its oversimplicity was creating for people. There was also a lack of clarity. What exactly does this mean? And the Labour Party, I think, are taking time to get it right. Now, I'm disappointed they're taking so long. I do think that we need it, but I am relieved that they are taking they're making the effort to get it right, and they're thinking about what will work. How do we protect women's rights? How do we protect the trans community? How do we make everybody's life easy to live? Clear guidance.
I just want to play one more clip from Pat McFadden on Sky News this morning talking about benefits, and to get your view, Christine, in just a second when we played that clip, on the WASPy women and what may happen to them, especially given there now appears to be another black hole in what Rachel Reeves has promised. That's another story today. Let's hear what Pat McFadden said about this on Sky News.
See this as both an offer and an obligation. I look at a lot of slides in the Department of Work and Pensions, and some of the slides that have struck me most in the few months that I've been in there have been the ones showing the rising number of young people not in education, employment or training, not for the last year or 6 months, but for the last 4 years or so. That's when it really started to rise. But 4 years ago,
post-COVID,
it was about 2/3 of a million. It's now about 1 million. So it's gone up very significantly since then. It's an international problem too.
Helen Whately, who we'll be speaking to in just a few minutes' time, she's the shadow Work and Pension Secretary, so the opposite number of Pat McFadden there, says Parliament has been told nothing, the public have been told nothing. 3.5 million WASPy women are being left in the dark. Christine, what would you do? What would the Liberal Democrats do?
Well, we've been quite clear that we feel the Ombudsman's findings should have been followed, and that isn't what has happened. And the frustration for so many WASPy women who have, the very first person who came to me after I was elected was a WASPy woman. So for 8 years, we've been following this. We've been fighting for these women to get recognition, compensation. And one of the people who spoke loudest was the previous DWP Secretary, Liz Kendall. And we were all confident that when the Labour government came in, the Ombudsman's findings would be followed. And they haven't been. And I think the women have every right to feel angry and let down because they believed that that's what would happen. And as for Helen Whately's comments, I would give them more credence if it wasn't for the fact that the Conservative government did nothing for the WASPy women.
Well, I'm going to be bringing
than the Labour government, and to try and blame other people. They're getting quite good at this. They think we've all forgotten the decade that we went through and the mismanagement. They think that somehow the public has just erased it from their mind. No, they haven't. That's why they lost the general election, and that's why they're suffering so badly in the polls at the moment. And the WASPy women have every right to be just as angry, even angrier perhaps at the Conservatives as at the Labour government.
Christine, thank you. As always, Christine Jardine there from the Liberal Democrats, the Liberal Democrat MP for or Edinburgh West. What do you think of what she said there? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Brad in Cambridge has. He says what Christine is missing is that when we voted for Brexit, many of us thought that it would lead to leaving the HR. They go hand in hand to many. Brad, I agree with you, but they are different things. Dave says, what does any MP know about a cost of living crisis? That's Dave in Dorset there. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P. I keep hearing everything leads back to the ECHR. Where's my human right to be safe and secure, which is bad enough, but then being forced to pay for terrorists, illegal migrants, etc.? It's not fair. Well, listen, thank you for your messages. Keep them coming in. We'll make sure that any questions you put forward, we consider them to talk to the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. That is Helen Whately. She's with us in a few minutes' time. We'll also go to the debate desk. James Robinson, who is a former Labour advisor, and Elliot Keck from the Taxpayers Alliance will be joining us. They'll have plenty of opinions coming your way very, very soon. Stay with us here on Talk.
I literally do not want that, and I don't want to be forced to pay money. And I remember being on the BBC, and they were talking about women in prison, and I don't think I've been invited back because I told them that one of the reasons a lot of women are in prison, of course, is because they don't pay the TV licence. So I think the wider view is that the BBC should fund itself. Those who want to listen to this sort of silly nonsense should pay for it. But the facts are that Reform are correct to complain about this Question Time programme.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch on Twitter, almost everyone. Bessie says, Christine Jardine is so ignorant, another Lib Dem. Everybody knows what a biological female is. It hasn't been an issue for the last 4,000 years. There's nothing ambiguous about it. It's perfectly clear. And another person says, regarding the 170 people who can't be deported, instead of calling them terrorists, how about identifying their demographics? Are they 170 Spanish people, 170 German people, Chinese, Indian? Oh, how I wish the media would grow a pair and state some facts instead of eggshell walking. Well, listen, we know that the vast majority of terrorists in this country are are Islamists. We know that. That is a fact. There are some homegrown terrorists as well who are Islamists. There are some from abroad. There's some far-right terrorists as well. They're a much smaller number than the number of Islamist terrorists in this country. We know the security services do that. So I could have stated that, but we all know it. So I don't think it's a mystery necessarily. But listen, thank you for your message. I want to talk in just a second to James Robinson, who's the founder of Woburn Partners. Lovely to see you on the debate desk again. James, how are you?
I'm very good. You?
Very well, thank you. Elliot Keck with us again, head of campaigns for the Taxpayers Alliance. Big story in the Sunday Times today about David Lammy being accused by senior barristers of misrepresenting figures about rape cases collapsing. It's been called a cynical attempt to push through the abolition of all jury trials. Well, the Justice Secretary and Celebrity Mastermind contestant has repeatedly suggested that 60% of victims are pulling out of cases because of delays in the court system, but the true statistic is actually 8%. It's really interesting because lots of people make complaints of sexual assault and rape and withdraw them for lots of reasons. Delays are definitely a big part of that. There's no doubt about that. But it's usually police delays. Then when it gets to court, and it can take a very, very long time, it can take years for these trials to take place. But we have Andrew Thomas, who is of the Criminal Bar Association. He's a King's Counsel, of course, acknowledging court delays placed a huge burden on victims, particularly in sexual assault cases, but said rational debate based on evidence was needed. He's essentially said the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister is not doing that. Mr Thomas says that includes using relevant statistics in a proper fashion. Justice, as the Secretary of State for Justice should know, begins only when there is a charge to bring a criminal case to court, all forms of rape included. There are wider worries about this in terms of how rape victims are dealt with, including the Rape Gangs Inquiry, which is taking far too long. It has been announced by Labour. They were pulled kicking and screaming into all of that. This week we also learned as well that David Lammy has been given another media advisor from the Cabinet Office, has been seconded for 6 months. James Robinson, you know about media management. Has Calamity Lammy actually got this right? Has he dealt with this properly? Has he putting out the statistics correctly, or has he erred again?
I just want to go back, if I can, to this barrister who seems to be more concerned with David Lammy than victims of rape. And I would like...
No, he would deny that, and that's a very strong allegation.
I would like them to focus on victims. I would like barristers and lawyers to focus on victims.
I'm sure that Andrew Thomas would say that through his professional life, he is focused on victims. He wants the statistics to be correct.
Fair, and I think whether they're delays of 5 years and upwards being caused by police delays or court delays, you're right, it has to be clear, and the statistics used to be used in the right way. But I think the government wants to speed up the processing of serious crimes and court cases, whether that's rape or sexual assault or violent assault. And I think that's the argument we should be having. Should we clear the backlog and ensure that justice is... there's a famous phrase, isn't there? A bit of a cliche, I know. Justice delayed is justice denied. It is. These people... there was a Labour MP wrote a very moving piece about this, actually, this week, about her own constituent who had her rape trial delayed 3 times. Took her, very sadly, tried to take her own life, and mercifully she didn't succeed. She's still here to tell the tale. That's where I want the focus to be, victims.
But surely it is incumbent on the Justice Secretary to get it right, and there's been more than one occasion now where he hasn't got it right.
It is. I mean, 60% of cases, I don't know if people are questioning the 60% figure.
I think overall that's right.
Exactly.
But when it comes, I mean, it's important to get things right. Yeah. What do you think about jury trials going? Is that a concern for you?
I don't like it, but I think it's necessary because in order to clear the backlog and ensure
that
victims get
justice. I've spoken to a number of barristers this week who say that actually there are much wider problems, and I'm responsible for some of this as well. I was a special advisor in the Ministry of Justice for 6 months. There are magistrates' courts, there are Crown courts that are falling apart in this country. Yeah. Photocopiers don't work. Wiring is out of walls. There are juries that can't get into jury boxes because there are leaks and so on. Elliot, what do you make of this?
Well, one of the really interesting things is what I haven't seen from David Lammy is a commitment to make this a temporary change. As far as I'm aware, this is going to be a permanent shift away from jury trials. And that leads me to think it's not anything to do with the backlog. The backlog is a technocratic argument that they're using to cover their ideological motivations. Very much similar thing with Rachel Reeves' 2 budgets. They use technocratic arguments about black holes when really you have an ideological desire to move money from work to welfare. And in this case, I think there's an ideological drive from the Justice Secretary, who is a far more left-wing Justice Secretary than I think we anticipated he'd be to abolish jury trials, because this has been a long-term aim for many people on the far left and within socialist movements. USSR, Cuba, China all abolished jury trials. I don't think they trust
David
people
Lammy's
to
not
receive...
Stalin.
No, I don't think he's quite Stalin, but certainly the permanent abolition of jury trials for prison sentences under, I think it's 3 years, is it? I think they're talking about. This is an extremely radical change. It's a complete transformation from the way we understand justice in this country. It would be one thing if it was genuinely being talked about for 12 months in order to clear the backlog, but you can also clear the backlog by, for example, sitting on every Saturday and Sunday, by employing more judges, by paying judges.
Well, I had a barrister on this week who said
overtime.
he's been at one of the biggest courts in this country, not the Old Bailey, there's another one in East London, I can't remember the name of it just off the top of my head, but he said there are 20 courts and he's never seen them all sitting.
This is
there
why
something...
I think it's ideological, Peter.
Is it ideological, James?
No, of course it's not. It's ridiculous. That's ludicrous to start talking about Cuba with respect. I think, but I agree with you completely on making it temporary, and I think you've actually nailed it. This needs to be a temporary measure to ensure that victims of crime can get justice. It shouldn't be permanent. I think that's completely right. I think you could spend a lot more money on clearing the backlog. You're from the Taxpayers Alliance. You don't generally like taxpayers' money being spent on...
I make an
or
exception
wasted.
for the justice system, I think it's clear to say.
And for lots of other things. But no, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. It has to be temporary. I don't like it. I think it's needs must, and I don't think it's ideological at all. I don't think you can compare David Lammy to socialist organisations in Russia. I think that's a bit...
Very quick final thought from you.
Well, I think the evidence is there. He is announcing the permanent abolition of jury trials.
Okay, but he's doing it for well, we can keep debating on it if you want to. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to speak to Helen Whately in a few minutes' time. She's the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, and we'll keep the debate going on the debate desk. If you want to take part, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Bernard says, did the public vote for a government to accept, looked after and support immigrants? We'll talk about that, certainly. And Leslie says, it's not just waspy women. What about the millions of women and men who lost out on the full pension because of their date of birth? That's another point, and we can talk about that as well, including with Helen Whately. In fact, I'm going to keep that on the screen and make that point to her, Leslie. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Bob in Cheltenham, who has reminded me that it was Snaresbrook Crown Court that Michael Shilladay, who was the barrister who was on the other day, was talking about, saying that he's a barrister. He represents lots of people in criminal cases, and Snaresbrook Crown Court, which is a huge one in East London, 20 courts, and Michael said that he had never seen them all working. So clearly these backlogs can be dealt with to some degree. It's a very, very complicated system. We're going to be talking to Helen Whately, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, in just a few minutes' time, but we're still on the debate desk. James Robinson is with me, and Elliot Keck as well. Let me ask you a little bit about this story about terrorists and the fact that there are 170 of them that we have in this country. We know that they're here. They're facing 24/7 monitoring because human rights laws are preventing their deportation. Now, that's a lot of money that we're spending. From the Taxpayers Alliance perspective, I would imagine, Elliot, that's a concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not any clear evidence that there's a way to resolve these issues without now leaving the ECHR. It seems to be so embedded within British political structures and within the court system that the only way to resolve these issues is to leave the ECHR.
But the interesting point with that is the European law of the ECHR so embedded within our case law and within the law of the land, separate from the European law, that actually leaving the ECHR wouldn't make that much difference?
Well, it's certainly not the be-all and end-all, which is, why Kemi Badenoch decided to look into this in some more detail to ensure that it wasn't just a reflex situation. But clearly, Article 3 and Article 8, the protections from torture, protections, the right to family life, are clearly causing enormous problems. We have people that are suspected and involved in terrorist activities here that we are unable to deport despite the fact that they're not British citizens, and it's clear the ECHR is one of the culprits. It's not the sole culprit, as you said. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to identify the different other strands in British law that makes these cases difficult, but it's clearly the starting point.
Shabana Mahmood is an interesting character because she is not your typical Labour Home Secretary, although actually when you think of maybe Charles Clarke, David Blunkett, maybe she's in that mould. Yeah. It's interesting how she is certainly saying that she wants to deal with these kind of issues. Do you think she will?
100%. Shabana will sort it. Shabana will sort it. You say she's not a typical Labour Home Secretary, and you point to David Blunkett and Jack Straw might be another example. She's not a Liberal Home Secretary. She's not a Liberal Home Secretary. She is a Labour Home Secretary, and she's going to change the law, and she is proposing to change the law and the rules governing immigration to ensure we can deport people more quickly. So I've got huge faith in Shabana. The problem, candidly, will be the Labour backbenchers and whether they'll wear what she proposes, because a lot of people will hate what she's doing, frankly, on the Labour side. But I think she's got a real passion to do this, and she will do it.
Let's return to that in a second, but for the meantime we're going to talk to Helen Whately, who is the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary for the Conservatives. She's with us. Helen, good morning.
Good morning.
I just wonder, Helen, if you could give me your thoughts on what you're talking about in regard to a £10 billion black hole that Rachel Reeves has, especially when it comes to compensating WASPy women. They would argue, certainly, that the Conservatives could have done that on your watch. Now you're blaming Labour and saying there is a major problem with our public finances. Just explain your position on that, please, Helen.
Well, the situation is that the Ombudsman was looking at this while we were in government, and then the Ombudsman reported back, and then Labour, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Liz Kendall, came and made a statement to Parliament saying she wasn't going to compensate WASPy women. Those women, I think, were quite taken aback by that, because she and other Labour frontbenchers had campaigned with WASPy women calling for them to be compensated. But anyway, Labour said that. And then we see, a few months down the line, actually the whole thing falling apart because they didn't do a proper job of looking at the evidence, and a deal done between the government and to pay off the legal fees of the WASPy campaigners, costing £180,000 for taxpayers because of that mistake they made. And now the whole thing has been opened up again, and the potential cost of compensation is up to £10 billion. Well, Rachel Reeves just put up taxes in her budget, saying that things like she needed more headroom, of course, as we saw, because she wanted to spend more on benefits and didn't want to make welfare savings as we'd have done. But anyway, that's what she did. She put up those taxes, and now it looks like there could be another £10 billion bill coming for the taxpayer.
Surely it should have been and could have been sorted out on your watch.
No, this was, I think, a complicated, long-running issue where you had people who were very unhappy about the situation.
But the fundamental decision about whether to compensate WASPy, the fundamental decision about whether to compensate WASPy women is a pretty straightforward one, is it not?
Well, I think any Secretary of State wants to look at the evidence properly, and what you see here actually is that Labour's Secretary of State at the time is now in trouble, and that the government was on this way to look like losing this legal case because the evidence wasn't looked at properly. That's why it's all such a mess.
Leslie's been in touch, one of our viewers and listeners. We have a lot of retired people who watch and listen to this programme and to this station. Leslie says it's not just WASPy women. What about the millions of women and men who lost out on the full pension because of their date of birth? There have been changes there that a lot of people really don't feel are reasonable and are fair. What do you think of that, Helen?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's clearly happened is that the age at which you get your pension has gone up over the years. I mean, that does reflect that people are living longer, able to live a healthy life and have longer time in retirement. So I think that is actually reasonable. And of course, you get the voice from the other end of the spectrum of young people saying, hold on, you know, how can we afford to make our way in life? There's money going to, you know, so much money going to pensions. Now, I actually think that we want to make sure that pensioners have a decent standard of living in retirement, be able to live in dignity. That's something we worked really hard as a Conservative Party, and we reduced pensioner poverty in our time in government. But I do think you have to make sure you strike that right balance between you know, older generations and the young people.
Let me ask you about an immigration story that's around today. 170 dangerous terrorists that cannot be booted out of the UK because of the European law that means that they have to stay here. I mean, this is a real failure, and finally, your party has come round to the decision that we should withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. Would that be the panacea here? Because many lawyers say it would not. It's in so much of our case law, so much of what is debated in Parliament. And clearly the Home Office really in a bind here. How can they get out of it, especially as the asylum system is so incredibly, and the immigration system is so incredibly complicated?
I mean, you're right. So we've said that we would withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights and repeal the Human Rights Act. Those two things go hand in hand. You've got to address the problem within the UK law as well as the European Convention on Human Rights. We did a piece of work led by Kemi Badenoch to come to that position, and we reached that position because we recognise actually it was so necessary in order to do things like control our borders and be able to deport people who shouldn't be here. And this is, to me, is one of the problems and challenges for Labour and the Home Secretary trying to put a tougher line on immigration and controlling borders. And she's talking good talk, but you know, fundamentally there are things like this that get in the way, and I see no willingness amongst the Labour Party, and particularly Labour backbenchers, to ever back the government to do the sorts of things they need to do, like get out of the ECHR in order to be tackling these problems.
Is the tail wagging the dog here in regard to Labour?
Well, as I said, I think they're talking the talk, and at least the Home Secretary is recognising the problem, but many of her backbenchers won't agree. And you know, in my area in welfare, we're seeing something similar where Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, they've talked about the need to reform welfare, but when they tried to make some welfare savings back in the summer, their backbenchers voted against it. They can talk all they want, like it's the
they can talk about what they want, but your party had 14 years to reform welfare, and the welfare bill spiralled out of control. Universal credit was cut off at the knees by George Osborne.
Well, we introduced universal credit. It was widely seen as a big improvement.
Not by Ian Duncan Smith, who resigned.
That there was before. Well, that was on particularly about the taper and how that worked, but he was the mastermind who brought in that system, and we did see in that period under George Osborne and between the time 2010 and the pandemic, unemployment coming down, the number of people on benefits coming down, that really turning around. As you said, yes, the benefits bill then did start going up under us between the pandemic and the general election. That was particularly an increase in sickness benefits being claimed. We had a set of reforms that we brought forwards, and when Labour came into power, they just cancelled all those reforms. And now a year and a half in, and they're still announcing reviews, and as I said, made absolutely no material progress on making any reforms.
I want to ask you about a story in the Sunday Times. This has been rumbling around for quite a while about Maccabi Tel Aviv and the Aston Villa match. Now we know that the Assistant Chief Constable, Mike O'Hara of West Midlands Police, has actually apologised for making untrue claims that the Jewish community said that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans should not be welcomed to Birmingham for that Aston Villa match. What does this say when you have a senior police officer not telling the truth to Parliament about a major issue of public safety in our country, and the fact that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were kept away from that match?
Well, so I haven't read the detail of this story, so I'm listening as you say it, but it sounds shocking to me. We clearly need to be able to trust our police and trust what they say. That's fundamental to UK British society. And I thought it was extraordinary what happened over that match, with fans not being able to go and support their team.
Final question. Is David Lammy right to axe jury trials, Helen?
I disagree with that. I mean, I think, you know, we've got 800 years of jury trials being a fundamental part of our system. It seems to be one of many things that David Lammy is getting very wrong.
Okay, thank you for your contribution this morning. That's Helen Whately there, who is the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, still on the debate desk, James Robinson and Elliot Keck. James, you were nodding to some of that, shaking your head to other bits of it. It's quite helpful, actually, having you in the corner of my eye, knowing what you're thinking. Tell me your thoughts on what Helen Whately said.
On which issue particularly?
Any of them. Pick an issue.
Well, I think where she was right, if I'm honest, and I'm always honest, especially on your show, is that it's your comment about the tail wagging the dog and the difficulty the leadership have in the Labour Party and the government.
Should the leadership change, do you think?
Well, that's a big question for a Sunday morning, isn't it?
Well, go for it.
No. But no, because I think Starmer's the best. I think Keir Starmer has got another 18 months to demonstrate that he can turn things around. That's the truth, and that's the view, the settled view of the Labour Party.
More so than. So it's not. You don't think he'll face a leadership challenge? There's a lot about this in the papers today. Not even after the locals, when the Scottish and Welsh elections, where things are slated, polls say, to go very badly.
I think it's unlikely because no one can agree on who the successor should be.
Yeah,
and he'd fight a campaign, a leadership campaign.
What do you make of this sort of Gang of Four story today that Wes Streeting would need? Let me get this right: Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, who are the other two? Shabana Mahmood, yeah, and you know, to be, I can't remember who the fourth one is, to be leader, he would need the support of different wings. I mean, that makes sense.
True. No, it does make it makes sense, but that's easier said than done, isn't it? Because everyone fears. I don't want to get too embroiled in Labour Party politics, but every faction of the Labour Party is more frightened of who might come next, because it won't be from their faction, than they are keen to get rid of the Prime Minister. That's the truth.
The four are actually, thank you to top producer Chris, who has told me that they're Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband, Lisa Nandy, and Lucy Powell, apparently. Are the
not
four.
Shabana. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Shabana Mahmood will probably run against him, I would imagine, but we'll see what happens. What did you make of that interview and what Helen Whately said there, Elliot?
I listened, it was very interesting. I think particularly the WASPy women case, I think Helen's right to point out the failures in the government's process so far. I mean, you rightly raised the issue of the fact that it wasn't resolved by the last government, but to be fair to the last government, they did manage to resist those claims for quite a while. Generally, that Conservative government didn't have a fantastic record on resisting claims by pensioners for very obvious reasons, given their vote base, but on this one they did manage to resist it, and it would be really shocking if the Labour government gave in on this one. I understand why people feel aggrieved by that change to the state pension age, but listen, there are millions of people my age who saw policy on tuition fees change just a year or two before we went to university. We're not getting compensation. We face very high interest rates on our student loans.
There's also the case that actually the WASPy women were told on many, many occasions that this was happening.
Yeah, and it was just an equalisation of the pension ages, worth saying. It was just bringing their state pension age up to the same age.
It is equality of some description.
It is exactly equality of some description, and they were told well in advance. So the Labour government need to absolutely resist these demands. We are talking about £10 billion worth of spending, or at least that's one of the estimates. It might not be quite that much, but this is an extraordinary amount of money. It's worth about 2p, or about 1p on the basic rate of income tax, so they do need to resist it. The last government did successfully resist it. They didn't resolve it, as you rightly pointed out, but they did manage to resist it, and this government needs to do the same.
What would you do about the WASPy women? How do you solve that problem?
Well, there's a reason Labour didn't put reforming or acceding to their demands or requests in the manifesto, because they can't afford to do it. That's the truth. And I'm not sure quite if this story is about a failure of process or and some incompetence on the government's behalf, allegedly over a bill that they'll have to foot. But the bottom line is right. I mean, you can't. Pensioners have got a triple lock. I hate to sound incredibly unsympathetic, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers will not want to hear this.
Give us a shout. This is on my programmes. We disagree without being disagreeable. Give me a shout if you disagree with what I'm saying, Elliot. James, however you want to put your point across. Maybe you're a WASPy woman, maybe you're married to one. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, and we'll get your views on the air, because this is all about discussion. The name of our station is Talk, and we are the home of common sense and the home of debate. Lots to discuss in the next few minutes, and we'll also bring you an update in the next sort of 15 or 20 minutes actually about the man arrested at Heathrow after a number of people have believed to have been pepper sprayed. That is Heathrow saying its teams are working with emergency services. An incident in the multi-storey car park at Terminal 3. It's not related to terrorism. The Metropolitan Police say it says one person's in custody on suspicion of assault. assault after some people thought to have been pepper sprayed. They're continuing and tracing further suspects. There's also disruption if you live in London, expected on the Elizabeth line as well, which comes out of Heathrow. We'll talk to Simon Calder about that a little bit later on and bring you right up to date with all of it. But that is, of course, our biggest airport where there is a problem and where a man has been arrested after a number of people have believed to have been pepper sprayed. We'll talk to you in just a second. We'll bring in a couple of calls to the debate desk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to stay with James Robinson, the founder of Woburn Partners, and Elliot Keck, the head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, next here on Talk.
A sort of bunch of fools. He seemed to be a voice of reason. Yeah. The first thing he did was ban puberty blockers, but then allow them back in suspiciously through the back door through a trial, which I'm incredibly suspicious about, by the way. Because you know, I'd rather understand where people stand. You know, if they're mental, let's see they're mental. I'm okay with that. You know, then we know what we're fighting against. I'm not sure with Wes Streeting, because he did stand out and sort of say puberty blockers are banned, and then obviously we've got these trials ongoing right now, so they're not banned actually.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're on the debate desk with Elliot and with James, so let's speak to Ashley in London, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Ashley, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Morning, Peter. I think, was it Christina?
Christine Jardine, the Liberal Democrat MP, yeah.
I felt the urge to have to call in, and the trouble is that we always base ourselves on the fact of the Brexit vote. It happened in 2015. I voted to remain, but I have to accept what happened, and we never exited. And in my view,
we are no longer members of the European Union.
I appreciate that, but what I mean is that the infighting within government has never allowed a total outcome of what was, in effect, the aim of Brexit. And the point I'm trying to make is that we come back to the judiciary and we come back to the ECHR and what it's used for. The people of this country are just fed up with the politicians going backwards and forwards and about what this means and what that means. And what we want is that ECHR, all well and good, but the reality is that we want our own security, our own rights to be upheld over those that are here from another country who are terrorists, who are convicted terrorists. That us here are at risk. We have no human rights in comparison to them. We are stuck with these people. We're stuck paying for these people. And, you know, whether we come out or we try and negotiate, you're saying we should negotiate. I remember clearly David Cameron going over to you and standing there with them, pleading with them, in effect, saying, look, we need to do this. We don't want to go out. However, this is what the consequence, and they basically stuck two fingers up. And,
well, actually, just hold that thought for a second. I promise I'll bring you back in just a second if you stay on the line. But I just want to bring in James Robinson and Elliot Keck on that point. Elliot, first of all, what do you make of what Ashley is saying there?
Yeah, I think that final point is particularly appropriate and well made, because reform is just not going to happen. And we'll spend years and years and years trying to convince the dozens of signatories to the ECHR, all of whom have very different motivations, all of whom have very different objectives, and it will end up failing. And in the meantime, we will have failed to address the very serious issues caused by the ECHR. So I don't think reform is a viable option. I do think ultimately we just need to leave it.
James, what do you think?
I think you made a really good point about whatever side of the divide you're on, remain or leave. We've left, but we're still doing all the things the EU, following all the EU dictates and rules, or if not the letter of them, then the...
There's still a lot of regulatory alignment, though, as well, on all sorts of things.
Well, that's the point. I mean, we were meant to leave and have do a Singapore-on-Thames or have a radically different sort of society and economy, weren't we? That's the whole point. And we've left, but we haven't done any of that. So it does seem a bit perverse.
I've never really met a Brexiteer who's satisfied. I wonder if you have. Have you ever met someone who says, do you know what, Brexit is great, well done, Theresa May. Ashley, what do you make of what James and Elliot have said there?
Well, it's a point I was probably trying to make it more eloquently than I tried to, and that's that we've kind of resigned, but staying at the table without a voice, and it's self-inflicted, because internally so many people are against it that we can't actually get away from the argument of leaving. Right, or how we move forward, and we're still in that situation. And but to the ECHR point, if you don't mind, that my concern is that we're going down to a single judge without a jury, and what we're finding now is that the decisions that they're making have been quite clear that they've been leaning on the side of allowing appeals and cases using these jars. Legislation to people here. We're making the situation even worse by just leaving these judges to make the sole decision based on case law that's been now made from the
Although a lot of this is more to do with... I know what you mean, Ashley, although a lot of this is more to do with straightforwardly criminal cases than others. But Ashley, you make some good points and very eloquently. Don't put yourself down there. You're welcome in this programme anytime. Thank you, Ashley, in London there. Let me just talk a little bit about this story that's emerging today about Professor Sir Chris Whitty attempting to silence government's ethics advisors who are warning about the impact of COVID policies. This is the Moral and Ethical Advisory Group set up to advise Chris Whitty, who is England's Chief Medical Officer, and senior ministers on the complex policy questions expected to arise during the pandemic. But the group fell out of favour after it raised concerns about the impact of lockdown on children. And at the height of the pandemic, Sir Chris told its co-chairman to stop putting its recommendations in writing. There's a lot that Us For Them, the campaigning organisation, has done on this as well. And actually, they were tweeting about this earlier. Let me see if I can find this. They were talking about the fact that, oh yes, here it is, that over £200 million of undeclared potential conflicts of interest at the heart of the key UK Pandemic Advisory Committee. And in the Sunday Telegraph, the UK Government's Ethics Committee silenced in 2021 after raising serious concerns about lockdown and vaccination policy. They also say that Us For Them reported the scandals to the COVID inquiry in 2023, 2024, and again earlier this year, 2025, giving it access to the paper trails and evidence they had collected, yet it has chosen to do and say nothing about either. Given that we are re-evaluating, certainly, the wisdom or lack of lockdown, this is very, very important that we know the full story here. James, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd never heard of the Moral and Ethical Advisory Group. So it looks like Chris Whitty was successful.
Silencing them. They were definitely silenced.
But yeah, absolutely. And I think the inquiry that's ongoing at a great cost to taxpayers. I mean, I know I'm sitting in a TV studio in London, it's easy for me to say, but it does feel like a colossal waste of money, because who said what, when and why. Well, I want to know if it was a good idea to lock down or not. That's the only question we need to answer.
I can answer that question for you. It was not. It's interesting as well that so many in the health service as well and the civil servants are spending so much time essentially servicing the inquiry, giving loads of... So it's not just the inquiry itself, it's all the other taxpayers' money that we're not even aware of from all those people behind the scenes. Elliot, your thought on this?
Yeah, listen, I absolutely agree. And you say say that we are examining whether or not the lockdowns were the best and most appropriate measure to respond to the pandemic. Of course, we are in this studio, but they are absolutely not doing this in the COVID inquiry.
I don't think they're asking many of the right questions.
And actually, that links to the point we were talking about with the EU, which is that we have essentially replaced EU bureaucracy with British bureaucracy. And for as long as British bureaucracy is as broken as this story demonstrates, we're going to run into the same problems. The British bureaucracy suffers from a mixture of mission creep and path dependency. And you saw this in the case of the lockdowns. Once it was decided that we were going to embark on very, very strict, very, very broad, very, very tightly enforced lockdowns, that was inevitably going to be the sole and only way that we managed this process for pretty much full 18 months of the pandemic. And it's very, very clear, looking at the data that we have, that was a disaster. It's very, very clear that the people that were warning at the time, and we always say, with hindsight, we can see it was a bad idea, but actually it wasn't with hindsight. There was lots of people warning at the time that we shouldn't be certainly taking children out of schools, certainly stopping people from being at the funerals of their loved ones. This was not hindsight. This was warned about at the time, but the British state, because of how I'm afraid to say disease it is in so many parts of it, was completely unable to hear those warnings.
Let me just get a quick word. We've got 2 minutes to the news. Let me just get a quick word about the senior police officer. This is the Assistant Chief Constable Mike O'Hara of West Midlands Police. He's now apologised to Parliament. He wrongly told Parliament local Jewish people were consulted on barring Israeli football fans before the Aston Villa match a few weeks ago. He's apologised to representatives of the Jewish community. He may well be recalled to Parliament because of this. We were told, I mean, there were so many allegations that Israeli fans threw civilians into a river at a previous match in Amsterdam. 200 of them were linked to the IDF. 5,000 officers were to be deployed in response. All of that was untrue, and this was put before Parliament. This is a senior police officer. Is his position tenable, Elliot?
No, it's not. The last time the British state used false evidence to prevent Jews from entering parts of England was when Edward I expelled Jews in the late 1200s after incidents like the blood libel in Norwich. This is an absolutely appalling instance. 700 years on from Edward I's expulsion of the Jews, we once again have a British organ of the state using false stories to block it. Essentially what we're talking about is blocking Jews from a part of...
We're going to talk more about it with the anti-Semitism campaigner Nicole Lambert a little bit later on in the programme. Tell us your thoughts on it, James.
I agree. I mean, I don't know if I'm glad he's apologised, that's for sure, because it's just, you feel like you knew all along that this was a ridiculous pretext to stop these fans coming to watch a British team in Britain.
There are some thugs who are supporters of Maccabi.
As there are in every football team.
You can get loads of intelligence on those individual people, ban them and let everybody else
take them out of the crowd. They've got spotters, they can take them out, they can get rid of them. So no, I think it was an absolute disgrace that game didn't take place, and I say that as a West Brom fan who doesn't like Aston Villa. But
okay, well, thank you both very much indeed. Elliot Keck there from the Taxpayers Alliance, and James Robinson, who's founder of Woburn Partners, on the debate desk. Just want to take a very brief moment to acknowledge that it is 32 years today since Edgar Graham, who was a unionist politician, he was murdered by the IRA. He was a very, very promising unionist politician, a law lecturer, an assembly member, murdered by IRA gunmen at the university, just 29 years old. A brilliant legal, academic and political career left unfulfilled. I wrote my undergraduate thesis at university on him. He was a lost leader of unionism, and he was disgracefully murdered by terrorists 32 years ago today in 1983. Just wanted to briefly mark that. Lots more to discuss. We'll be talking in just a second to Simon Calder about what's going on at Heathrow. We'll also be talking after that to Helen Fields, the former barrister, about David Lammy accused of twisting rape case figures for the jury trials plan. Loads to discuss. I want to discuss it with you too here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Sunday morning. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock, and there's so much to discuss. In just a second, we'll be talking to a former barrister and a crime writer about David Lammy being accused of twisting rape case figures on the jury trials plan. He is saying that 60% of people are withdrawing from rape trials because the jury trials have to be scrapped to try and deal with the backlog in the justice system. We'll talk to Helen for her views on all of that. We'll talk about Maccabi Tel Aviv as well. They were playing Aston Villa, and a senior police officer has given incorrect evidence to Parliament about that. How tenable is his position? We'll talk about that. Also, the 170 terrorists who we have to monitor here in the UK because we can't get rid of them on, guess what, human rights grounds. We'll go live to Simon Calder in just a second as well on the Heathrow breaking story there. Some people have been treated by the London Ambulance Service, taken to hospital because of pepper spray attacks. One man arrested on suspicion of assault. This was this morning. We'll talk to Simon about that and the implications for travel across the country as well. Lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of issues. I want you to continue to do that, please. We'll get as many calls, text, tweets and voice notes on the show as we can. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. We usually around 11:20 do a bit of a voice note a-thon. Tech Up Dave is working through those at the moment. You can send me those on 0344 499 1000 through WhatsApp. That's the same number for WhatsApp text messages as well, and phone calls too, of course. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Simon Calder is with me now. He's the travel correspondent of The Independent. He's in Manchester today. It's here in London where there's a major story at Heathrow. One man arrested on suspicion of assault, according to the Metropolitan Police. They were called this morning, earlier on, 11 minutes past 8, after reports several people had been assaulted. A statement from the Metropolitan Police says a number of people were sprayed with what is believed to be a form of pepper spray by a group of men who then left the scene. Armed response officers then intervened and went to the scene. London Ambulance Service has taken various people to hospital. Simon, what more can you tell us about this? Clearly, it will have many implications there at Terminal 3 at Heathrow.
It certainly will, yeah. As you say, just after 8 o'clock was when this began to unfold. And the first response, as we've been hearing on Talk, when there is any situation where there's possibility of terrorist act, of some kind of protest, nobody knew at the time, is to close everything down, which they did. They shut the spur road. That leads from the M4 motorway under the northern runway to Terminals 2 and 3. That was shut for at least an hour, I understand. They also closed the main railway line, the Heathrow Express and the Elizabeth line from central London for at least an hour. 17 trains cancelled there. Some of them were running through to Terminal 4 and Terminal 5, which were unaffected. But as a result of that, well, the whole operation for thousands of people at peak time for getting to the airport for those mid-morning flights going across to the US, also going over to Asia on airlines like Virgin Atlantic, Delta, Cathay Pacific, Emirates, and many more. People simply couldn't get there, and they might have allowed plenty of time to get there, but then they suddenly found they were too late. And of course, you know, Heathrow absolutely working at full tilt all the time, no slack in the system. They're not going to say, oh, Peter, yeah, sorry you were held up. We've kept the flight behind for half an hour for you. They simply can't do that. So I'm hoping that people who were flying the Atlantic or across maybe to the Gulf have been told, well, we'll try and get you on another flight. But yeah, echoes, dare I say it, of an incident at Terminal 4, which you covered in September, when there was actually a discharged CS gas canister. The whole terminal terminal was evacuated, and that led to many, many long delays and cancellations.
And now, a few hours after this, Heathrow saying to passengers, allow a bit of extra time to get to the airport. They will get there, but of course, this delay likely to affect everything today, as you're saying, Simon.
Yeah, so I've just been checking. All trains are running now again on the Elizabeth line and the Heathrow Express, but with some delays. The big problem is, actually, if you've got a flight at 5 o'clock this afternoon, you might be thinking, well, I'm going to head down there now, and that could actually make things worse. We've seen this before. It's understandable behaviour. Everybody suddenly thinks, well, I'm going there to make sure I don't miss my flight in 6 hours' time. Well, you won't, but you might, because you're there getting in the way, actually stop other people getting their flights. So very, very messy at Europe's busiest airport, and the last thing that travellers need. But it just shows you so many things can go wrong with aviation.
You're absolutely right, Simon. Thank you. That's Simon Calder there, who is the travel correspondent of The Independent. He is speaking to us there from Manchester about what's happening in Heathrow. The London Ambulance Service has just given another update. It says, we were called today to reports of an incident at Heathrow Airport. We have a number of resources on the scene and are caring for a number of patients. It adds that they remain at the scene, and we'll send more updates later today. If we get any of those between now and 1 o'clock, of course we will bring them to you. The police say the injuries of the people involved are not believed to be life-changing or life-threatening. The commander, Peter Stevens of the Metropolitan Police, says at this stage we believe the incident involved a group of people known to each other, with an argument escalating and resulting in a number of people being injured. He said officers responded quickly. There will be an increased police presence at Heathrow throughout the morning to continue inquiries and ensure safety in the area. It's not being treated as related to terror. Right then, let's speak about jury trials and Helen Fields, who is a former barrister. She's now a crime writer, an author. Helen, thank you for your patience there. I appreciate that. We did say we'd speak to you about 6 or 7 minutes ago, and of course we need to get that update from Heathrow, so thank you for that. David Lammy under pressure, the Justice Secretary. He has been accused by Andrew Thomas, who is of the Criminal Bar Association, that whilst, yes, there are court delays in regard to rape trials and others placed a huge burden on victims, particularly in sexual assault cases, he is accused, David Lammy, of getting his statistics wrong. The Justice Secretary repeatedly suggesting 60% of victims are pulling out of cases because of delays in the court system, but the actual fact is that the vast majority of rapes reported are abandoned long before a charge is brought due to factors such as policing delays, and actually it's about 8%. What do you make of this, Roy?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the statistics, it's really obvious because the Crown Prosecution Service releases the figures really regularly. We can see quarterly reports, and what we know is that, in fact, over the last year, the figure has fluctuated between about 7.9 and 11.4. So David Lammy is completely wrong. It's not 60%. It is a much higher figure if you look at from the point in time when someone first goes to the police right up until matters go to the Crown Court, then it's a higher figure. But that is one of sadly, the nature of reporting sexual offences. But it's not.
Why is that the case, Helen? Why do people drop out? Just paint a picture for us why people drop out, because there's a huge dropout rate from reports of sexual assaults, reports of rapes, to the time of charge. That's a big dropout rate. And then, of course, as things go on, there is that 8% dropout rate as well.
I think it's a very difficult thing to talk about. And I say this as somebody who, and I've written about this quite widely, I was a rape survivor. And it's a very difficult thing to want to go through the whole process.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Helen. I didn't know that.
Thank you. Yes, I've spoken about this quite a lot, but the concept of going to talk to someone about it, and even if you feel able to go and talk to the police initially, then going on to, there are so many hurdles. There's such a length of time before you get anywhere near a court, but also for lots of people, for lots of survivors, the idea actually of putting it behind you, getting therapy or walking away in lots and lots of ways is an easier way to get through this. It's not an easy thing to go into a courtroom. It wouldn't matter whether it was a judge sitting or a jury sitting, and to tell lots of different people. But also, in many ways, when you're waiting for that sort of resolution, it prevents or delays the time when you can heal. But I think what's really offensive about the whole thing, the figures that David Lammy is using, and Natalie Fleet MP and people like that is, rather than saying we're going to reduce the time waiting for victims of serious crime, they've used this thing about a rape victim. They've only talking about rape victims. There are lots of victims of really serious crimes in the system. But I have to say the main point here is that the courts already prioritise victims of sexual assaults and rape, serious sexual assaults.
Yet it still takes such a long time as well, even for those very, very important trials to get to court and to be heard.
The system is grossly underfunded, and it has been for years. I mean, there are two ways of doing this, and there's no third option. It's really simple. We can either make all this better by properly funding our court system, or we can make it better by depriving people of a fundamental right to justice that I think in 2020 Peter Lammy said was fundamental to our democracy in a tweet that is still live and available to them.
So is it disingenuous then of David Lammy to say I'm going to abolish jury trials for cases where the sentence would be 3 years or lower because it's going to deal with the backlog in a better way? Because I've spoken to a few barristers about this today who say, look, there are loads of ways that you could fix this, and actually the problem is not juries, the problem is really, really basic stuff like wiring falling out of Crown Courts, about jury or judges' desks not being able to be used because there are water leaks on them, courts not being used properly, the sitting days being restricted. Is it actually a reasonable point? Forget about the rights and wrongs, although you could by all means talk about that, of having a jury trial or not. But isn't it disingenuous to say by getting rid of them in many cases that would actually speed things up?
It is. First of all, they've completely ignored the fact that there is no hard sentence top at 3 years for most offences. So then you have to go through some bizarre route that they haven't yet explained as to how you figure out which offences, would be having a jury or not, and have a single judge. So they haven't dealt with that. But also, on any given day in the courts in England and Wales, between 14% and 20% of every court is not sitting. There is no problem with getting through the backlog if we just make sure that there's a court available and a judge available and that there are lawyers available. And that means that we can persist with what has been a fundamental backbone of our justice system with no need to compromise on that. We just need to, open the courts that are shut. And as you quite rightly say, our courts are physically in a terrible state at the moment. They're not adequate for their purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting, specifically with rape as well, that there's some cases going through at the moment that are being listed for 2029 and 2030 already. I mean, it's just such long delays and such many other reasons as well. Helen, how are you in regard to your own experience? Did you get justice? You've spoken very, very bravely about it on many occasions. I'm going to go back and read and find out more about what you've said. But, how are you doing?
I'm okay, and that's the truth. It was the day after my 16th birthday, and I've spoken about this. The person who raped me was a then part-time, we don't have them anymore, part-time police officer. And I couldn't go to the police. I didn't tell anyone at the time. It took me years to talk about it. I talk about it now for the simple reason that the more we talk about it and the more we're honest about it in the media and on forums like this, is that the more victims do feel able to come forward. But I'm afraid it's the reason why I find it incredibly offensive when rape victims are used as a political talking point. That's not acceptable. There are lots of good reasons why we should be talking about rape and what rape victims go through in order to get justice, but this isn't one of them.
Helen, thank you. You're a pretty kick-ass human being, and I love having you on my programmes. You really break it down so idiots like me can understand the law and what's happening in the court system, and I wish you well, and thank you for speaking to me today. I really appreciate it. That's Helen Fields there, who is a former barrister and crime writer. I got the something wrong a little bit earlier on. I just want to apologise for that. It's actually 42 years since the unionist politician I mentioned there in Northern Ireland, Edgar Graham, was murdered by the IRA, and it made me think a little bit about terrorism on British streets, not just here in Great Britain, but in Northern Ireland as well. Bright young lives cut short by terrorism. They've been cut short by Islamist terrorists at London Bridge, Manchester Arena, 7/7, numerous attacks worldwide, of course, and not least the 7th of October. This is why it's so important to mark these anniversaries, stand up and challenge those who eulogise terrorists like the IRA and Hamas terrorists. That's what I do in this station. I'm going to continue doing it. I'm going to make absolutely no apology for doing so, no matter what people throw at me or say online. That is what I'm going to do. And thank you to everybody who has been in touch on all sorts of points today, including the WASPy debate as well. Mo in Shrewsbury says, I'm a WASPy lady, I lost it massively, but do accept the equalisation, getting the pension, but this is compensation, not the full back payment. And because of failings by the Department of Work and Pensions, they should pay up. It is unfair that illegal migrants get so much, but us ladies who have paid in are denied compensation. Sarah says, I'm also interested that Labour are so adamant they won't leave the ECHR because they know they want to go back into the EU. It's an interesting part of that. And certainly David Lammy, again, the Justice Secretary, under pressure this week because he's failed to say 7 times that he didn't want to go back into the customs union. That was a podcast he was speaking to earlier. Dawn in Chelmsford says, morning Peter, we have to accept a stark reality in the UK. We can't afford to compensate the WASPy women. We can't afford the benefits bill or a big increase in defence. We are broke. Mick in Wellington says, at last our politically motivated and incompetent police chiefs are being exposed. They're a danger to the public and frontline officers. They must be held to account and charged with misconduct in office. The drains must be cleared. This is after a senior police officer who has apologised to representatives of the Jewish community after wrongly telling Parliament that they had agreed that the decision to ban Israeli football fans was the right one. That was from a game in Birmingham a few weeks ago. We'll talk about that properly with Nicole Lampert a little bit later on. We'll take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes. We may even have a voice note to thon if they're going to be ready. Are they going to be ready? We'll see. Tech Up Dave is beavering away as always, industrious young man that he is, or more accurately, industrious man that he is. Stay with us here on Talk.
Some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the home of common sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, I'm a waspy woman. If I'd have been entitled to £10,000 for each year I lost out, we'd be talking 60 grand out of pocket. But I'm a realist. I'm annoyed at how the government's betrayed us, but there's no way in the current circumstances compensation can be afforded. In any case, I believe we'd only be compensated by a few £100. Thank you also to Jason in the Lake District, who says, the waspy women problem is one made by Labour and opposition, jumping on a bandwagon purely and simply to gain votes from a particular section of voters. Another clear example of the bad judgment and incompetence we've come to expect from the Labour Party, says Jason. Peter is in Nottingham and has some thoughts on pensioners and pensions. Peter, you're very welcome. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say this morning?
Good morning, Peter.
Hello there.
I'm 87 years old.
Okay.
I went to sea when I was 16, and I've never been out of work during my working life.
Great stuff. That's a great record to be proud of.
It is something to be proud of. So why am I always penalised?
How do you feel you're being penalised, Peter?
Well, we are always classed as the problem. I mean, I was born before the war. I lived through the war, luckily. We helped to get this country back on its feet again. As I say, I worked, never been out of work. I paid my dues, paid my taxes. I don't owe anybody anything. And why am I being penalised? We are always picked out as the problem to all these...
I don't think you're a problem, Peter. I don't think pensioners in general are a problem. There are a lot of you, certainly, and it's a strain on the public finances. That's not your fault for living a long and hopefully very healthy life, Peter. But do you think the pensioners just in general are just blamed because there's so many of them? What do you think the reasons are? Is it jealousy? Is it the fact that younger people are paying higher taxes, yet sometimes pensioners have... Not all of them, of course. Many pensioners have miserable and very difficult lives, but there are, of course, many pensioners who have lovely lives.
Yes, that's quite right. But on the other hand, there is always money for everybody else. When it comes down to dishing the money out, there's money for everybody in the world. Whoever comes here, all the immigrants, there is always money for them. Always.
Do you feel your pension covers the cost? Do you think it's a fair pension for what you've paid in?
Well, considering I think we're the lowest pensioners in Europe, I mean, I'm okay. I've got a decent pension.
Okay.
But the thing is, that, as you say, there's lots of people that haven't.
Yeah, it's true.
So all these people that haven't got it, why are we giving it to foreigners that have contributed absolutely nothing and failing to give it to the people that have worked all their lives and got this country back on its feet, only for the Labour Party to destroy it again?
Okay. Peter, thanks for your thoughts. I really appreciate that. That's Peter in Nottingham there. Great call, great name. John is in Cornwall. He's giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, Peter. Yes, I just want to make a comment on the waspy women fiasco.
Sure.
The ladies were given years of advance warning of the changes coming into place. And let's not forget, the changes were made because it was found that the difference in age groups for men and women was direct discrimination.
Yeah.
So if the waspy women actually get any form of compensation whatsoever from the government, the bill won't be 10 billion. It will actually be hundreds of billions, because all the men who would have had pensions in the period...
Interesting point.
Can sue for compensation.
John, do you know what? I'm going to bring you an anecdote from my dim and distant past as a very, very, very young political nerd. I remember when I was 8 years old in 1992 watching the budget, because that's how much of a nerd I was. And I remember that, I think it was Norman Lamont would have been the Chancellor at that stage, talking about this issue and saying that women born in a certain year were going to have to work until they were 65. So that was back in 1992-93, if I remember that correctly. I remember it so clearly because my mother was 1 year above the age. So basically, she was in a position where she would only have to work until 60 rather than 65. She actually ended up working longer than that, but that didn't matter. The point is that I remember that very, very clearly, because I remember working out exactly when it was, and I remember that being announced in 1992. Now, lots of people won't have been watching the budget, but as you say, there were lots of public information things, there were lots of letters that came to people. Do you think it's fair that we as the public and we as taxpayers should pay for compensation for WASPy women?
No, it's not fair at all, because, like I say, the ECJ found the situation to be direct sexual discrimination, and they gave many years of notice to the women that these changes would come into effect. Therefore, if they do get compensation, that's more direct sexual discrimination against men.
Very interesting points there, John. Thank you for that. What do you think about what John said? If you're a WASPy woman, or maybe you're married to one, what do you think about what John has said there? 0344 499 1000. Lots coming on juries and trials. Let's hear a few voice notes now. This is from Nick.
Morning, Peter. It's Nick from Loughborough. It's all very well your left-wing commentator on the panel suggesting that jury trials could be suspended to give swifter justice to victims. Well, he's forgetting that the idea of a jury trial is to give justice to the accused. Those wrongfully accused deserve a jury trial, and he didn't mention that. And this is the whole thing that I find particularly disturbing about Lammy's stance on this. Pete, have a good weekend.
Thank you. I think I agree with a lot of that, actually, and it's really interesting what Helen Fields was saying as well. Another Nick has been in touch on the same issue, actually. Here's what the second Nick of the morning says.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick from Mansfield. With regards to David Lammy and the government wanting to get rid of jury trials for any trial that's going to give a sentence of less than 3 years. When a government is trying to take everybody to court or take people to court for free speech issues and give them a sentence of just under 3 years, that puts things in perspective for me. Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed for your voice note. Let's hear another one from Ian.
Hi Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. Your two panellists talking about the abolition of the jury system. Can you just tell me, where are the people who are then convicted super quick going to go? Because we haven't got any jail places, or does that mean Labour are then going to let out a load of other criminals like they've already done to cause mayhem on the streets? I mean, the whole thing is warped. Build more prisons, employ more judges and prosecute timely. And if police can't get their act together, increase the police force. Get people to stop looking at tweets and doing rubbish jobs, get them out there, get them getting their evidence and getting them banging these criminals up. It's not difficult.
Ian, really, really good points. And I mean, we heard from Helen Fields there, we heard from Michael Shilladay, the barrister, we heard from the former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis earlier in the week. I was on Drive, and both of them were saying, all three of them were saying, this isn't going to speed things up. This isn't going to make a massive difference, and this is actually quite worrying about the right to be tried by a jury of your peers is something that a lot of people feel very, very strongly about. It's certainly a big issue as well with terrorists and the fact that we can't deport them. Lots of people have been in touch about that too, and this person, for example, Audrey in Tatton, says, I'm enjoying listening to all the gussets on about this morning's show. I just wanted to ask, I think she means guests. Is that perhaps a typo in what Audrey said? I think she maybe meant guest on this morning's show. I wanted to ask specifically about the 170 terrorists that are currently being monitored in the UK. It's alarming to hear we're unable to deport regarding the ECHR. Do we as British citizens not benefit from the ECHR rules? Shouldn't the innocent be protected? Why is ECHR apparently only protecting these dangerous individuals? Why is it that those who govern our country and are duty bound to ensure we live in a safe country, unable to overrule the ECHR or challenge it with speed? It doesn't make sense to me. Thanks to Rob from Wiltshire, travelling out to the Philippines at the moment. He says, I hope not from Heathrow, I hope it's somewhere else, said, well, that was unfortunate for me. Oh, no, it is Heathrow. I'm flying today, normally fly out of Heathrow, but as it happens, this time flying from Gatwick. Good, where I'm having a cold beer at the moment. Glad to hear it, Rob. It's never too early for an alcoholic drink when you're flying out. Feel sorry for those whose travel is disruptive. That can't be easy for many, so surely the action taken by Heathrow appears to be well over the top. Will they compensate properly for those affected, especially for those missed flights as a result? Rob, safe travels to you. Tim says, what a brave woman. We, the normal, honourable men, support her and her cause 100%. Talking about Helen Fields there. Thank you to Mac in Glasgow. Says, I'm absolutely sick of the ACHR law, which is meant to protect the rights of people, but it just seems to protect the rights of criminals. These terrorists who terrified their victims should have no rights. What about the rights of victims? It's a very, very fair point. On the terrorist watch list, the Islamist terrorists and immigration, Daniel has been in touch. Here is his voice note.
Hey Peter, it's Daniel from Epsom here. So there's another 170 potential terrorists being added to the already 50,000 on the Islamic terror watch list. So we've got about 50,000 on the Islamic terror watch list now. Have a guess what that number was in 1995? It was 0. So there's a direct correlation between the amount of Islamic immigration from the third world you have and then subsequent terrorist threat, okay? We need to stop all third world immigration. The 50,000 that are on the terror watch list and their families need to be deported. We've got to have some tough action here. The public have had enough. I'm sick of the enemy within.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's hear another voice note now.
Hi, Cardi P. I don't get my state pension yet. Not quite yet. I'm more worried about not getting it at all. I think the thing is, triple lock is unsustainable. We should only get it inflationary, not to do with the other two aspects of it. I'm more worried about not getting one at all. When you've paid in 37 years and then they may change it at the last minute and say it's means tested, that really would be unfair. The government have got a rule at the moment that they have to give you 10 years notice, but who knows with this government, they may say in 2 years' time, you've got to be means tested, no state pension at all. And that, if you've paid 37 years in already, is not fair.
Lots of messages coming in about pensions. By the way, that person's initial is L, but I don't think she's ever told us her name. If you want to, feel free. Or maybe you just want to stay like as sort of intriguingly, anonymously mysterious. I mean, L, maybe you're an MI5, like sort of M or Q or R, who knows? Becca in Norfolk says, it seems like women shout for equality until it affects them, then they expect compensation. The change in the pension age was well reported before it changed, says Becca, who has no sympathy for the waspy women there. Jenny in Bicester says, why are pensions considered taxable? If you go over the tax allowance, if you have another pension income but state benefits are not taxable at all, yet we're told the state pension is a benefit. Karen says, I'm a waspy woman. I'm still working at 66. I've worked since I was 16 and continue to contribute by paying income tax. Why are the pensioners who have never contributed never criticised? And your caller, John, doesn't understand that waspy women were not notified of the increase. Well, I mean, waspy women were informed. There was a public information campaign. There were letters that went out to people. There's certainly, I don't think they were given enough notice when it came to the changes coming in sooner than were originally planned to do so, Karen, but certainly people were told. And I do think that it is fair to mention that. Derek in Hertfordshire says, what are the pensions in the rest of Europe? Well, Derek, I'm sure you can look that up. Another person says, tell everyone that's self-employed, make sure they have 30 years stamp or they won't get a pension. And Leslie says, Labour says benefit cut of youth job offer rejected. How will that work with the workers' rights bills for employers with the threat of tribunals if the youth doesn't want to work? Lots of interesting points coming in, lots more to come. We're going to talk to Will Geddes in just a second about these terror lists, the 170 people who we have to keep monitoring. We have to keep, they're highly dangerous people. We have to make sure that they don't commit crimes. But of course, it's all to do with European Court of Human Rights and European Convention on Human Rights legislation that we can't even deport them. Lots to discuss on that. Be sure to get your point across on that. I'm here right through to 1 o'clock. Going to take as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes as I can in that time. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Bob in Cheltenham, who says, anecdotally, it's well known that as a criminal defendant, you've got a much greater chance of acquittal in front of a jury than before a judge. Very, very interesting point there. Thank you for that. Michelle says, after following politics for quite some time, I've come to the conclusion it's all panto. Lots of things get said, nothing gets done, certainly nothing in the interest of the UK Indigenous people. If your guest has trust in Shabana Mahmood, he really is deluded. He was talking, I think Michelle's talking about James Robinson, who was on earlier on the debate desk. This is not his fault. We are being gaslit. Martin in Lichfield also has some thoughts on Shabana Mahmood. She talks the talk but won't be allowed to do a thing about it because of the hard left backbench MPs. It's there to see for everyone. The slow, deliberate demise of democracy, freedom of speech, scrapping of juries, open borders, as well as the insanity of net zero and continuation of Marxism is frightening, says Martin. The distraction with Nigel Farage is a deliberate diversion tactic. I don't think everyone was perfect at school and said anything wrong. I don't think so, says Martin in Lichfield, who says it's a great show. Well, Martin, thank you for that. Appreciate all the thoughts that are coming in to the station. Hard quite simply says, what about our human rights? Tracy says, I would like to know who is paying the legal bills for these foreign extremists. If it is the taxpayers, we need to change the laws to stop funding all immigration appeals, says Tracy in Wakefield. Well, Tracy, you make a good point, which leads us nicely to the next story, which is about the 170 terror suspects who we have to monitor the whole time, but we cannot get rid of them because of the European Convention on Human Rights. Will Geddes, the security expert, is with me now. Will, great to talk to you. What on earth is going on here?
It's a very good question, Peter. Thanks for inviting me on the show. It's a very, very, very good question. I mean, the European Court of Human Rights, which we were one of the first signatories to in the 1950s, when it was first evolved, was supposed to provide a fair and balanced and judicial system to allow anybody who is accused of a crime or alleged of a crime, that the judicial process would treat them in the fairest sense possible. But the one thing that we've established, obviously, since leaving the EU, and certainly since we've had this massive influx of illegal immigrants coming into the United Kingdom, is that it is too lucid and it is too flexible to potentially be exploited by other parties. And there's got to be some serious questions as to why we're still adhering to what is a template, Peter. We're not mandatorily required to follow it, but it is a template that we are supposed to be following. It needs updating, it needs reviewing, and we need to be removed from it so that there is still a fair judicial system for anybody in the UK who is accused of a crime to be given the suitable human rights, but not to be applied in instances where individuals are exploiting it. And as you said, Peter, there's 170 odd individuals that are on the additional 43,000 Islamic extremists that are being monitored by the security services, that is only putting a greater load bear on the security services, counter-terrorism policing, and us, the general public.
What is the actual practicality of looking after a terrorist, making sure that he, and it usually is he, is not carrying out an attack or planning an attack or doing something like that? I mean, are we talking about 24/7 surveillance here?
Well, the surveillance will go to various different levels, Peter, obviously depending on how urgent or how severe the individual is being regarded. But for these 170, the vast majority of them will have to wear an ankle tag, which obviously only permits them to leave their properties at certain hours during the day. It will restrict their internet access, which you and I both know you can circumvent pretty easily. They would not be able to look at certain content or communicate with certain parties through their cell phones, but again, easily to circumnavigate and circumvent to basically afford yourself to be able to do these things. But ultimately, one of the biggest challenges over and beyond that is ensuring that those records are being managed appropriately, i.e. their movements, the trackers, their internet communication and their cellular communications. But over and beyond that, if it gets to a more extreme level and someone flagrantly disregards those parameters, then you're looking at physical surveillance teams. And that, Peter, let me tell you, having done it for the last 30 years, is not only expensive, but very manpower intensive.
Of course, you need a lot of bodies to do it, a lot of ears and eyes, and very alert people to do it as well, which can be, of course, very boring work as well as very important work. I wonder if you could respond to the point that Daniel made a little bit earlier on, one of the people who left us a voice note, who said that in terms of people on terror watch lists, there are far more now than there were many years ago. Is this all about immigration? Clearly there were terrorists and homegrown terrorists in the IRA and other terrorist organisations previously, but is this much worse now than it was even in your lifetime, Will?
Okay, well, there's probably two answers to that, Peter. The first of which is, yes, of course, the Islamic extremism numbers have increased. They represent about 75% of the 43,000 plus that are being monitored by the security services. In terms of late plots that have been intercepted by MI5 and counterterrorism policing, there have been 19 late-stage plots that have been thwarted since 2020. So we're looking at a massive increase. There's been a number of arrests that have also increased within the Islamic extremism sector, and that is roughly about 250 in 2024, and we're still waiting for the statistics this year. So to answer that first part of the question, yes, absolutely, Peter, we have a greater threat from Islamic extremism. The second part of it is, could this be attributed to illegal immigrants? Now, the challenge there is the National Office of Statistics does not have or collate any data. Neither does the Home Office. So we have no way to quantify, and I think...
That's absurd, Will. That is absurd.
I mean, call me a cynic, Peter, but I think Labour are actually sitting on much of the data that there is out there that could attribute to criminal and terrorist activity.
As I always say, Will, just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong.
Thank you. But in terms of attributable data or statistics of those perpetrating crime or even potential terrorism activities from illegal immigrants, this data is not available, Peter. And now we look at David Lammy talking about removing juries from the judicial system. Well, excuse me, that's probably one of the greatest breaches of the ECHR. So you're either doing one thing or the other.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, actually, especially on the ECHR. I hadn't considered that. Will, thank you. Really appreciate you talking to the programme today. Just going to bring you the latest now from Heathrow. 5 people have been taken to hospital after that pepper spray assault. It's a form of pepper spray that was sprayed on them, the London Ambulance Service says. It treated a total of 21 people at the airport's multi-storey car park at Terminal 3. Earlier, police said injuries of those affected are not believed to be life-changing or life-threatening. The ambulance service stood down at 2 minutes to 11 this morning, shortly after the London Fire Brigade. So that's 5 people taken to hospital after being sprayed by what police described as a form of pepper spray. That's the London Ambulance Service giving us that information. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, including Stephen Millings from Belfast. He says, I feel let down by Brexit because Theresa May really screwed it up. Farage would have done it properly. We could have reformed the EU from the inside we couldn't have reformed the EU from the inside as Cameron tried that and the EU stuck 2 fingers up at him, says Stephen. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P, I keep hearing everything leads back to the ECHR, whereas my human right to be safe and secure, which is bad enough, but then being forced to pay for these terrorists and illegal immigrants. Brad in Cambridge says what Christine Jardine said earlier, what she's missing is that when we voted for Brexit, many of us thought that would lead to leaving the ECHR. John in Norfolk, I've had it with both Labour and the Conservatives. They're both pages in the same playbook. The reason Reform UK are so egregious to their sensibilities is because it throws their legacy and quite frankly misguided policies and attitudes in the bin. Good riddance to both of them, says John. And another person saying, Ian, saying that Christine is happily deluded. The Supreme Court ruling is being implemented by the same people who implemented, in inverted commas, Brexit. We are foolish to expect a different outcome. John in Middlesbrough says, I should have asked Christine Jardine if they're just a Labour apologist party. They never criticise Labour. Davy fawns over Starmer in PMQs. Davy ignored the postmaster, says John, so they need to stop fawning over the waspy women. And Yorkshire Gaz says, hi Cardi P, hi Yorkshire Gaz. Christine isn't victim-led and can't say the realities of the Pakistani rape gangs or government's lack of accountability. She's just bringing the trans people into it. How many trans people have been raped by these gangs? The answer is 0. Christine is a grifter, like most others, in Gaz's opinion. And Amanda says, the British people have always had the strong belief of fair play deep in their DNA, every aspect of thus being systematically destroyed by the evil creep of communism brought about by this Starmer government. Dan in Kent says, I find myself more towards capitalism in my thoughts. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, I think I was talking about seeing Panorama. Thank you to Dan. Terry in Slough says, We should do what other countries do and just ignore the ECHR. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we've got a spineless, gutless Labourist government that seem to put welfare of every Tom, Dick and Harry who illegally comes into our country before the British people, says Terry and Slough. Well, actually, believe it or not, it was David Cameron, not perhaps our strongest Prime Minister, who did ignore the European Court of Human Rights. They said, you've got to give prisoners the vote. He said, not going to do it. And guess what? The world continued to turn. You can't ignore these courts. Other people do it. I'm not saying that international law or European law should necessarily be ignored, but it can be. It has been. And maybe there are some laws that should be ignored because other countries ignore them too. And you have places like Germany, for example, Greece, Italy, that deal with the immigration problem in very, very different ways to how we do. So why can't we do that more? Lots to discuss. We'll take more of your calls, including one I definitely want to take if we can get back in touch with the lady who rang us about waspy women. So lots to discuss on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the home of common sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good point from Mary in County Down, who's got in touch to say Islamist terrorism in the UK is largely attributable to people who come from legal immigrant families, British-born sons of immigrants who have been radicalised here. For example, the Manchester synagogue attacker Salman Abedi, the Manchester bomber, his parents were Libyan. He was born in Manchester. Very, very good points there. Thank you to Andy, who has been in touch as well. He says, great listening today. When I moved to Spain, guess who paid all my legal fees for applying for visas and residency? Me. If I was to find myself unable to support myself, guess how much financial assistance I would get from the Spanish state? None. Guess how much public health care I get for free? None. I pay €60 a month until I retire. In addition, before being allowed to live here, I had to prove that I had the means to support myself. I agree with all of this. Why is it not the same in the UK? Another person says, I agree with Daniel's voice note. I bet the majority of our people would agree. Deport, deport, deport ASAP. We're getting deeper and deeper into dangerous territory. It's time for action now, or will it be too late? But I mean, the question I suppose I would ask is it just about illegal immigrants? And lots of people talk about that. But as Mary has pointed out, most of the terrorism in the UK is perpetrated by people who are British citizens. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Dave says the letter regarding the state pension change for the WASPy women may have been sent to my wife, but it wasn't received. The same for many other women too. Rob says when Labour raises pensioners' tax thresholds in line with inflation every year and increases pensions in line with the same rate as all other taxpayers, they can remove the triple lock. However, current pension increases gross increase less inflation, therefore it's peanuts. Who in this country could live out of poverty on just the basic pension? Probably not a single person. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of things, including Jane in Milton Keynes. Jane has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Jane, you are a WASPy woman, I think. Is that correct?
Yes. Good morning, Peter.
Hello there. Great to talk to you. Tell me your experience, Jane.
So I should have had my pension when I turned 60 in 2019. Mm-hmm. And I never actually realised what was going on till about 2010, because with one thing and another, I had to change my job, I had to change my lifestyle. Diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, I was in a lot of pain. I never realised what was going on.
Sorry to hear that, Jane.
Thank you. But there are two things that I wanted to, three really. First of all, around about the 1980s, there were so many older men on that were working. They let the older men take their pensions early when they were 60 or 61, to make room for the younger men that were coming up behind. So that the older men were allowed to take their pension to make room for younger men. Okay, that was the first thing. The second thing was, when it came to the pension increase, it was done so stealthily that, first of all, I realised what was happening, and I would have got my pension at 62. Then they moved the goalpost to 63, then 64, then 65, and I thought, surely this can't get any worse. And then it was 66 they increased the men's pension age as well from 65 to 66. So that was the second thing. The third thing was, I found out that I had to keep paying my national insurance stamp until the day I retired. Otherwise, I would have had gaps in my pension, because they changed the rules in 2016. If you don't keep paying the national insurance stamp, you might qualify for 35 years of pension to get the basic pension, but you have to keep paying national insurance to get the maximum amount, which
it's clearly very, very complicated. But the basic point, Jane, I think from what you're saying is you realised in 2010. I mean, that gave you, or you were told, or it came to your attention in 2010 anyway. Was 9 years not long enough to actually say, okay, there may be lots of changes, but actually I can prepare for my pension? A lot of, there's a man who was in touch earlier on who said, well, it's equality that men and women retire at the same stage. Is that not fair?
In a way, I suppose it is, in one way, but the job that I was doing was manual work, and the job that I was doing I couldn't carry on doing because my body wouldn't allow me to carry on doing that. Here's my point is, first of all, I thought I was having to wait another 2 years.
Yeah.
And then 3 years. And so over about 5 years, they increased my pension age by 6 years. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I was never catching up.
Yeah,
but
I know what you mean.
My worry for everybody else that's coming up behind is that, especially the ones that are about to take their pension, check your gaps in your pension on your government gateway, because if you don't, you're going to get a lower amount. There's
some really good information on Martin Lewis's website about that, because I checked that as well. My pensions were all over the place because I worked for lots of different organisations, some of which give me a pension, some didn't. So, Jane, that's very, very good advice. And if you go to moneysavingexpert.com, there's some really, really good advice for people, younger, further, perhaps coming up to retirement age. So, Jane, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. What do you make of what Jane said there? 0344 499 1000. I want to speak to Spike in Hampshire. Spike, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Mark, good morning, Peter.
Hi there.
First of all, I am a pensioner. Mm-hmm. Now, people seem to think that the state pension is not tax assessed. We don't don't pay income tax on a state pension. Now, if you've bought into a second pension when you retire, you get assessed on that pension.
Yeah, if you have a private pension, yeah.
But they also bring in the state pension as part of the tax assessment. So
if it goes beyond the threshold, yeah.
Yeah, and the two pensions together take me above the tax threshold.
Right.
All right, so I'm now paying income tax. People are starting to call the pension a benefit. And if you're going to reclassify a state pension as a benefit, look further down where people are on benefits. They don't pay income tax.
Yeah, it's a fair point actually, Spike, and but I do think once you get to a certain threshold, you should pay income tax. I do believe that's the case, no matter what your income is. But listen, Spike, thank you very much for your points. Mo in Shrewsbury says, you're wrong in saying we were informed of the changes. The WASPy movement was all about that. I had 2 years' notice about the changes, but there are many women who didn't get letters and did not know, hence the PHSO coming to their decision of compensation. Mo, it was in the public domain. People did know about it, and sometimes you've got to inform yourself about your pension. I mean, I've taken steps. I'm not saying I'm, perfect. I'm not saying that, everybody. You do need to, in this day and age, there's a lot of information you can get online. You can talk to advisors, you can go to the Citizens Advice Bureau, you can get free advice on what your pension is, and I do think people need to do that. I'm not blaming anybody, I'm not blaming the WASPy women, but I do think it's an issue of equality. It's a complicated issue as well, actually, because there are many people who are very, very aggrieved and missed out to a huge degree. But the fundamental principle, I think, that men and women should retire at the same age and the state pension age should be the same for both, is, I think, something that should have been fixed a long time ago. It should have been done properly. I do have sympathy for people like Jane, I do have sympathy for you, Mo, but it's a big issue which will continue to dominate. 0344 499 1000 if you think people should be compensated or if you think they shouldn't. We're going to talk about political issues in America next. Jennifer Ewing, who is the spokeswoman for Republicans overseas, will be in the studio. We're also going to talk about that Maccabi Tel Aviv lies that were told to Parliament, it seems. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We'll be here right through until 1 o'clock today. I'm back actually doing Drive tomorrow between 4 and 7 and on Tuesday as well. Loads to discuss today, including what's going on in America and whether Pete Hegseth has a secure position. We'll talk to Jennifer Ewing about that in a second. We've got some news through as well I'll read out in a second about what's happening between Benjamin Netanyahu and Friedrich Merz, who's the Chancellor of Germany, about Trump's peace plan. I'll ask Jennifer about that briefly as well. Give you the latest on Heathrow too. We'll talk about the police apologising to Jewish leaders a little bit later this hour over the Maccabi Tel Aviv report. This is the fact that the police gave information that was not correct to Parliament, West Midlands Police. It's a real scandal. I wonder if Assistant Chief Constable Mike Hara will have a tenable position at the end of all of that. We'll take your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes as well. The numbers, of course, are 0344 499 1000 to give me a ring. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note. We'll have more of those shortly on 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on that number or ring me on it too. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. And yes, just my movements this week, they have changed a little bit. So I'm doing Drive tomorrow on Tuesday between 4 and 7, and then I will be here on Friday, Saturday and Sunday between 10 and 1. So lots to look forward to. I'm going to just give you the update on Heathrow now. This is Terminal 3. A man has been arrested, multiple people allegedly pepper sprayed by a group of men at Heathrow Airport. Emergency services say 21 people have been treated, 5 of them taken to hospital. The incident started in the Terminal 3 car park after an argument. They're not treating the incident as terror related, and both the ambulance service and indeed the other emergency services have been, the ambulance service and the fire brigade have been stood down, but of course the police continue their investigation. Another story that has come out in the last sort of half an hour or so as well, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has had a press conference in Jerusalem with Friedrich Merz, who is the German Chancellor, of course. Netanyahu has said that the political annexation of the West Bank remained a subject of discussion. The status quo expected to remain for the foreseeable future. And he said we're about to finish the first phase of Trump's Gaza plan. We're almost there. We're close to the second phase of the Gaza plan. He says he'll be having very important conversations at the end of the month on how to ensure the second phase will be achieved. He made the remarks during the joint press conference in Jerusalem. Well, Jennifer Ewing is a spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK. Lovely to have you in the studio, Jennifer. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me.
Gaza, for Trump anyway, continues to be a big issue.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's, one of the things he's hoping to put on, places where he's solved some sort of war. But, it's obviously a lot more complicated than anybody realized. My understanding is, and that's obviously breaking news, is that a lot of the issue is who's going to police this. Is it the Turks? Is it Qatar? That sort of thing. So I think that's what's still being worked out.
A lot still to work out. We'll continue to cover that story, of course, as the week goes on. It's undoubtedly something that will be in the headlines. Something else in the headlines is that apparently President Trump is starting to grow weary of ongoing controversies in regard to the Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth, according to a new report. The President has stood by him in public, of course, but apparently less enthusiasm behind closed doors. The Atlantic reported on Friday. I'm actually just back from Washington. I was there this time last week, certainly, and a big controversy about shoot to kill, this idea that Hegseth ordered people to be killed who were on a boat. Just take us through this controversy, Jennifer.
Sure. So I think what you're referring to is either the Atlantic report, which is pretty much unsourced, and then there's also the Washington Post report from the 28th, which had anonymous sources. This is a hit piece. This is a hit piece on Pete Hegseth because he's a threat pretty much to sort of people who want to continue these forever wars, as well as that sort of Obama, Biden, more social justice kind of military. So if we take that aside, the particular issue goes back a few weeks with regards to Venezuela, and they were, going after these narco-terrorist boats, which are bringing drugs into the United States. Last year, over 100,000 100,000 people were killed from fentanyl poisoning in the United States. So this is a really big deal. And it was one of the issues that Trump ran on. So with regards to the boat, there were 2 of the narco-terrorists who apparently fell off the boat after it had been struck once, but the military had said destroy. So then they went after it again. The Washington Post story said there were 2 fishermen outside of their boat, and, Hegseth gave the order to just kill them all. Again, an unsourced story. We were not there. It is not surprising, though, that The Atlantic is writing a piece trying to say that, Trump's not happy with Hegseth. So time will tell, but this does remind me a little bit of the Russia collusion hoax, where you have a lot of these people putting out information without properly sourcing it, and then by the time they have to retract it, which they will with this Washington Post article, it's too late. The story's out there.
And it sort of doesn't matter.
It sort of doesn't matter. Everybody thinks Pete Hegseth has gone rogue and is saying kill everybody, on these fishing boats.
Do you think Trump thinks that? I mean, how much, where does Hegseth, the defense secretary, sort of sit in the MAGA firmament? Because he has been a key ally to Trump to some degree. Is he a threat to J.D. Vance in any way?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I mean, they are very much America first. They both...
But I mean for the nomination.
Oh, no. I mean, Hegseth is not a potential presidential candidate at all. I mean, if you... look, it's 3 years away, so it's a long time, but of course everyone looks forward. I would say, the other people will talk about would be Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, possibly as a vice presidential candidate with J.D. Vance. But then I think you'll see some more traditional Republicans also running. There's word that Mike Pence might try to run.
Wow.
I mean, so because you and I have talked about this over the last few years. There's a real division in the Republican Party where you've got the America First people, and then you've got the old sort of Bush, Cheney, country club Republican.
Cheney, of course, who voted for Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
because
Cheney
he
who voted for Kamala
Harris.
Harris.
Trump was such a threat to democracy, as he put it. I wonder, I mean, where do you think that battle goes? I know it's a long way away for the nominations and so on, but where do you think that goes? Which side wins? Does MAGA win, do you think? Or
whether you call it MAGA or you call it America First.
America First, whatever you want to call it.
I do think they will win. However, we saw in the elections that happened a couple weeks ago that the Democrats did very well. And the #1 issue that came out of voters' mouth was affordability. It's not even the economy anymore, it's affordability. Now, we know that Trump ran on closing and controlling the border and the economy. He's done an extraordinary job closing the border. He really has. So even the Democrats are not going to try to undo what he's done there. But there are a lot of people in the America First coalition that feel he has spent too much time on foreign policy. And while these trips to Asia and getting the beautiful sword from the new female Prime Minister of Japan are all nice, if you are still going to the grocery store and it's incredibly expensive, which it is. I mean, you were just in America. It's insane.
I was okay, but I mean, I think I went into a coffee shop and got a cup of tea for myself and the person I was with, and a cookie for us both, and it was like $19 or something.
Yeah.
It was just, or maybe more, no, it was $22. That's right. And I just thought,
and then tip. And then the tax.
Tip, 25% tax and all the rest of it. I mean, you talk about the foreign affairs issues as well. President Trump's America First agenda spelt out in a new White House national security strategy. What do you make of this? I mean, it talks about Europe facing civilizational erasure. It could be unrecognizable in 20 years. Certain NATO members will become majority non-European. America will shift away from the burden of the Middle East, seeing it as a source of destination and international investment. It's really interesting kind of analysis here. What do you make of it?
Well, I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that's paying attention. I mean, we heard the Vice President J.D. Vance speak, February this year, at the Munich Security Conference, talking about, hey, Europe really needs to...
He was brutal in what he was saying, certainly,
and I think it shocked, all these European elites, but saying, hey, America, we don't have unlimited resources, nor, quite frankly, do Trump or President J.D. Vance have the mandate to continue these forever wars that the United States does not see as existential to it. So I don't think that should be a surprise. Marco Rubio, over the last 9 months, has also been saying the exact same thing. We are no longer in the business of spreading democracy around the world. We want stability and security. A big word you will have seen come out of that memo is hemispheric. Right? So there's going to be a complete focus on the United States more on, the Western Hemisphere, including Latin America. So, yeah, I don't think that will be a surprise to any. I mean, Trump has been very outspoken about this Ukraine-Russia situation is a European war. And I think the last thing he said is, we'll sell weapons to Europe. Not even saying to Ukraine, to Europe. I mean, obviously we know where they'll end up, but I think it's really going to be a struggle for Europe to figure this out.
What do you think about the peace talks in the US concluding in regard to Ukraine? Zelensky saying he's determined to continue working with the US after speaking to Steve Witkoff, who is Trump's envoy, of course. And interestingly, Jared Kushner making a big appearance over the last few months as well, the president's son-in-law, who had taken a bit of a step back. It wasn't really involved in the first sort of few months, certainly, of the Trump administration. Yeah, you're right. I mean, Jared Kushner, of course, is married to the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, and they had official roles in the first Trump administration, which a lot of people thought that's a little too, nepotism. But anyway, he is back, and it's interesting that a lot of these peace deals are two real estate guys. Witkoff is a New York real estate guy, and of course Jared Kushner, his family business is real estate. So I think this is probably a last push effort by the U.S. to get peace. I don't know if it can happen. Is Russia really motivated to go for peace? I mean, they feel they're in a very good situation right now. I think they feel they probably, sadly, have endless amounts of bodies they can contribute to this war, which, of course, we know Ukraine does not. So, of course, we pray for peace. That's what we want. Whether it can happen, I don't know. But the U.S. has made it clear we will not be involved in the same way we have been under the Biden administration. And just bring it back to what you were talking about earlier, this affordability crisis, these domestic issues, the fact that often the American public is perhaps not that concerned about what's happening in Ukraine. We've seen Congress taking the foot off the gas a little bit as well in terms of how much is talking about it, how much money they want to give it in the last couple of years. How much will domestic policies, aside from the affordability crisis that you're talking about, which is obviously incredibly important, how much will that define Trump's last 3 years, do you think?
Yeah, I think it will be the main way his last 3 years are defined.
Does he get that, do you think? Is he focusing on that, or is he being distracted perhaps by these foreign issues, as you were chatting about a second ago?
Okay, exactly. So that's exactly what it is. It's a distraction. You have a certain...
Because they often get that. A lot of people feel that way about Starmer as well. They talk about never hear care. The fact that, yes, they do have to attend things like the G7 and UN as General Assembly and so on, but their job first and foremost is for Americans and for British people respectively.
Absolutely, and you will even see in that strategy document that came out, like the president was praising countries in Europe that were more nationalistic, whether that's Germany, whether that's what the Romanians tried to do unsuccessfully, what the Georgians tried to do unsuccessfully, Hungary, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, this is a real nationalist, populist president. So the domestic issues are going to be huge. I think people think, if you move on into the culture wars, I think they feel he's done a great job, especially women, women who are like, hey, we want our sports to ourselves. We don't want to compete against men, that sort of thing, safe spaces and bathrooms. So I think people will give him credit for that. Again, like I said, the border, but he's got to get the affordability down because people will not be looking like you and I who, pay attention to these foreign policy issues. That's not what they're going to judge him on, unless it's like, okay, just stop paying attention to these things that don't matter.
In terms of how it relates to that old, that great line in the 1992 presidential election, is the economy stupid?
It's the economy stupid, that's exactly right.
Jennifer, as always, thank you very much indeed.
So
that's
nice
Jennifer Ewing, spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK. We'll take your thoughts on all of these matters in just a second. Amanda says, with all the best intentions, it seems peace in Gaza will never be achieved. as long as young Muslim children are brainwashed to achieve the destruction of Israel and all Jews, a terrible way to live for both sides. Lots to discuss. Lots of people getting in touch on pensions as well. We'll talk about that more, and we'll talk about Maccabi Tel Aviv in a minute or two as well with Nicole Lampert. The fact that Parliament was told things that were not true by the Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. Loads to discuss. Lots of time to do it as well. Get your call in between now and 1 o'clock. 0344 499 1000.
Some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the home of common sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. If you want to give me a ring, you want to send me a voice note, you know the number, 0344 499 1000. Take up Dave working through the voice notes now. We'll get some more of those on a little bit later on. Mike in Whitney says, morning Peter, we shouldn't need a national rape gang inquiry. There are local police all over the country who know where this happened, as has been happening for decades, and have ignored it and left our children to be brutally abused. Our police are scared of the Pakistani men so close to ignore the horrific abuse of, so chose to ignore the horrific abuse of our abandoned children. It's a huge blemish on our country and society, says Mike. I agree with that. Chris says the asylum that was gleefully built under the last Tory and Labour governments is now well and truly run by the lunatics. Perhaps the abolition of juries is just Labour trying to buy votes. They can add criminals to the number of votes they expect from benefit recipients, civil servants and trade unions, says Chris in Surrey. John in Germany says if they abolish jury trials to speed up the process, surely this will mean we'll need more prison places. Is this being addressed? I haven't heard this mentioned by Calamity, Lammy or Labour. Let's speak to Sue in Kent, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Sue, you have some experience of the court system, don't you?
Yes, I do. Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
Yes, my husband had to go to court. I have his permission to talk about this, by the way.
Okay.
He had to go to court, and when we got to the Crown Court, we had to wait for a barrister. There was no barrister there, and we had to wait for the barrister. When he came in, he obviously didn't have the facts or history of the case, and it was a right mess. Then when we had to go to the sentencing, because that was a different court and different time, there was no judge. They had to go and pull a judge out from another case that had just ended, and there was no solicitor.
What a shambles. What an absolute... And how long had you waited for this to get to court?
2 years.
That's outrageous. Do you mind me asking what your husband was accused of?
I'd rather not say. I'm sorry, but
that's
it was
okay. That's all right. That's your decision. That's your decision.
Yeah, but and when the judge came in, because they had to pull him away from another case, he was in a right mood. It was so bad you could feel it coming off him in waves, and we felt that the whole case had been influenced because of the way it happened.
Yeah.
I'm not saying my husband didn't deserve the result that came.
Okay.
But it was just such a shambles, and there was people waiting outside that had been there for hours, and they got there, they waited and waited, and then their case was dismissed until another time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in the magistrates' courts, I covered magistrates' courts as a journalist in Northern Ireland and Crown Courts as well, and then time and time again, postponements. Oh, we haven't got all the evidence. We haven't got this in the file, that in the file. I mean, that must have been... Look, no matter what your husband did or didn't do or whatever, the point is that it takes far too long, and that, what you've just described to me, is a total shambles.
Yeah, well, see, I was living under a sentence as well, because I was having to live with it while this was all going through.
Yeah.
And I felt it was totally unfair, and I think it is unfair to the victims in these cases that have to wait so long and witness this kind of circus. I just wanted to let people know.
Well, thank you for that, Sue. I appreciate the call, and do you know what? It's rare to talk to someone who's actually in your position on a national station, so I really do appreciate you give me a ring, and thank you for it. That's Sue in Kent there. Appreciate her thoughts on that. Tim in Suffolk says, is the sentencing guide used as the guidance for a jury trial? If so, against the maximum sentencing guide, nearly all will be jury trials. Well, that's a really interesting point as well about all this, and I do worry if things will be negotiated down to say, well, you know, if it's up to 3 years, we can do it without a jury. Therefore, this can be done in a quicker way. Eamon in County Down says, surely there's 170 suspects could be rounded up and detained instead of just being monitored under anti-terrorism legislation. Very good point. Chris says, listening to Helen Whately MP a little bit earlier on, 14 years they did nothing, never wanted to come out of the ECHR, brought Afghanistans in at night, never deported any, never looked into rape gangs, never stopped the boats, and then gave us the Labour Party. Never again, hopefully see them or Labour in power again. Another person says, if the ECHR had only been invoked 12 times, as we keep being told, then the problem is the interpretation of the laws, which means the guidelines are embedded in our judicial system and will be impossible to remove. I think that's a very, very good point, actually, and it's one that Dr. Chelvin, who we sometimes have, the immigration lawyer who's on, made, and he said, look, it's not just about the ECHR, it's not just about the European legislation, it's about everything else that's brought in as well. Becky in High Peak says, I will tell you what is unsustainable. The public sector final salary pensions. Us in the private sector live within our means and have had a change over to money purchase schemes. Well, Pat McFadden, who is the Work and Pension Secretary, has been talking to Sky News this morning. He has been giving all sorts of views on the benefits system and perhaps benefits withdrawals as well. This is what Pat McFadden has been saying to Sky News this morning.
We see this as both an offer and an obligation. I look at a lot of slides in the Department of Work and Pensions, and some of the slides that have struck me most in the few months that I've been in there have been the ones showing the rising number of young people not in education, employment or training, not for the last year or 6 months, but for the last 4 years or so. That's when it really started to rise. But 4 years ago,
post-COVID,
it was about 2/3 of a million. It's now about 1 million, so it's gone up very significantly since then. It's an international problem too.
Baroness Faulkner as well, a sort of Labour grandee who was head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, has been very critical of Labour, saying it's let down women on the rape gangs aspect and also on the trans debate as well. Pat McFadden was tackled about this. This is what he said.
What the government has to do is to give guidance not to one organisation but to the whole of society about how this Supreme Court judgment is implemented. And the bottom line is the Supreme Court judgment will be implemented. That will mean change, and the guidance will advise organisations how they should do it. How soon? Well, I can't give you a date.
Weeks, months?
We'll get it right rather than giving an arbitrary.
Pat McFadden there, the Work and Pension Secretary. He also talked about Unite, the union, and its links with the Labour Party. Loads around this weekend about potential threats to Keir Starmer. A lot of this is just speculation stuff. We keep hearing the names Wes Streeting, Shabana Mahmood, and who they would need the support of and all the rest of it. But certainly a lot of money comes to the Labour Party from the unions. And if Unite, the big union, I think it perhaps is the biggest union in this country actually, if it left the Labour Party and refused to give it money in the future, well, that would have serious implications for the Labour Party. That's what Pat McFadden was talking about and was questioned about as well this morning.
I would regret it, but we would survive and go on. Look, I think this is a good government for working people. We've seen rises in the minimum wage, we've seen help with energy bills, we've seen a freeze in rail fares in the budget, we've seen a whole range of measures that will help Unite's members. I think the trade union relationship is valuable and important, but of course, that's a decision that's up to them.
Unite is the largest union in the UK, we've checked that. Terry in Birmingham says, as ever, much talk about can't afford the triple lock, but nothing about the trillions for gold-plated early to retire public sector pensions we're in hock to. Ernie says, we could deport the 170 dangerous foreign nationals if we wanted to. There's nothing stopping us, not even the ECHR. They don't belong here, they belong to another country, send them home. And if Europe's courts don't like it, sue us. The fine would be massively cheaper than paying for them to stay here. And if just one of them decided to kill us, there would be carnage if we got told he or she shouldn't be here, says Ernie. Another person says, hi, will trials without a jury be in place when the rape gang trials begin? Just asking. Well, it's an inquiry rather than trials. Those trials are ongoing, of course, but the inquiry needs to hurry up. Teresa says, hi, Peter, talking about the pensionable age that keeps moving. The longer people have to work, the fewer jobs there are for younger generations. So there's a no-win situation. Loving the show, says Teresa. Thank you for that. John says, here's a question for you. When I started working, I was told the state pension was an entitlement if I paid enough national insurance, stamps as we call them. Now they're saying it is a benefit. Now benefits are not taxed, so why will the state pension be taxed? If it is then people who are getting 30+ K benefits should be taxed, or is it another two-tier Labour policy, says John from Nunthorpe. Leslie says pensions are classed as a benefit when it suits, but go to the dentist or optician, you're told you have to pay, as pensions are not a benefit. Another person says the inevitable outcome, I tend to agree with the caller from Nottingham a bit earlier. Peter, pensioners do get a bad rap. I can only assume politicians are continuing to ignore the problems of old age. The UK baby boomers have already paid massive amounts of money, says Mick Mox. And Rob says, why not charge pensioners, benefit claimants and workers tax and national insurance at the rate current at the time? Nobody in this country who has an income from whatever source should avoid contributing to the state in the form of taxes. Income should be topped up for pensioners to the level of benefits claimants and minimum wage workers, whichever is the greater, and it should not be means tested. Our pensioners should not be paid less than benefits claimants or minimum wage workers, especially those benefit claimants who, or minimum wage earners who have never contributed sufficiently to your state system, says Rob. Also, pensions were never a promise, they were a certainty. Successive governments have always referred to pensioners, not to old scroungers. Those young voices now complaining about pensioners and pensions not being sustainable have never paid enough to pay for their 22 years of time spent as children and at university, this time paid for by pensioners, and indeed still is. That's a very good point as well. Thank you, Rob. Much appreciated. Keep your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes coming in, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about the police. A senior police officer apologised to representatives of the Jewish community after wrongly telling Parliament that they had agreed with the decision to ban Israeli football fans from a game in Birmingham. This is an absolute disgrace. Mike O'Hara is the West Midlands Assistant Chief Constable. I would be astonished if he keeps his job, but also if he does, well, that will be a terrible, terrible indictment of how West Midlands Police dealt with this. It was a shambles from start to finish. We'll talk to Nicole Lambert about that in a second, but let me just bring you up to date with Heathrow. A man's been arrested. This is after multiple people were allegedly pepper sprayed by a group of men at Heathrow Airport at Terminal 3 in the car park there, multi-storey car park. Emergency services say 21 people have been treated, 5 of them taken to hospital. They say the incident started in the Terminal 3 car park after an argument. They're not treating the incident as terror related. If we get anything more between now and 1 o'clock, we will of course bring it to you. But get your call in, use the break, pick up the phone, let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, we're back. There we are. Great to have your company. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock. I'm actually here tomorrow between 4 and 7 and on Tuesday as well with Drive. Hope to have your company for that. I'm here on Friday, Saturday and Sunday this week between 10 and 1. Mid-morning Friday, Saturday and Sunday. The schedules are certainly changing a little bit. Just at the moment, we will of course bring you the very best right throughout the week, and I'm looking forward to Drive tomorrow and Tuesday and indeed mid-morning Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch as well. Lots and lots of people getting in touch. And Leslie, in her opinion, says nothing will change with the European Convention on Human Rights, while Hermer, as she calls him, is the Attorney General. That's Leslie's opinion. Derek says after we deport all the illegal migrants, we then deport migrants living off benefits. We have to deport the lefties that don't swear allegiance to king and country. They should be sent to Africa and the Middle East. Derek, I just disagree with you on that, I'm afraid. I think that we live in a free country and people should be be free to disagree. If you're here illegally, you shouldn't be here and you should be deported, definitely. If you're here illegally, well, and you're not breaking the law, well, there's no reason to deport you, I don't think. And certainly when it comes to people who disagree with me, well, I want to live in a free country, because if the lefties are in charge, I want to have my freedoms. If the people on the right are in charge, well, the lefties should have their freedoms too, and their freedom of speech. This is the home of free speech. It's the home of common sense. And if you want to get your point across between now and 1 o'clock, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about an absolute scandal. This is the police being misleading MPs on the ban of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters going to Aston Villa. This was last month, the Europa League fixture. We covered it in great depth. I covered it on Drive as well on the day itself, actually, the Europa League fixture. And some of the detail of this is astonishing. We're going to get into it in just a second with our guest, the anti-Semitism campaigner and journalist, anti-Semitism campaigner and journalist Nicole Lambert, a senior police officer. This is the Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. Listen to this. He's apologised to representatives of the Jewish community after incorrectly telling Parliament they had agreed with the decision to ban Israeli football fans from a game in Birmingham. So he said, he went to Parliament, he said, oh, the Jewish leaders agreed with it. Guess what? They didn't. He told MPs, Mike O'Hara, that officers had consulted Jewish representatives before concluding it was too high risk for Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters to attend a Europa League fixture against Aston Villa last month. He repeatedly told the Home Affairs Select Committee on Monday that Birmingham's Jewish groups had said they did not want Maccabi fans coming to the city. He says this was communicated directly to police and that it was included in the force's risks analysis. The claims are untrue. He has now sent a written apology to representatives of the Jewish community, saying it was not my intention to mislead. Well, why did you give the incorrect information then, Mike? He said he accepted no community members told police that supported the ban. He said he would update MPs as soon as possible. I mean, this guy should be recalled to Parliament immediately for giving incorrect information. Some will say he was lying. Maybe he denies that, but the claim was untrue. The claims about the Maccabi controversy are the latest by West Midlands Police to unravel under scrutiny, the Sunday Times reports, and could lead to him being recalled to Parliament. Dutch police, they've already said the British force justified the ban using false intelligence about disorder involving Maccabi Tel Aviv fans attending a game against Ajax in Amsterdam last year. Incorrect claims that Israeli fans threw civilians into a river, the 200 were linked to the Israeli Defence Forces, not that there's anything wrong with that, and 500 officers were deployed in response. Amsterdam law enforcement said 5,000 officers were deployed in response. Amsterdam law enforcement said the true number was 1,200. I mean, this is just wrong, and the security assessment was wrong as well. Let's speak to Nicole Lambert now, who is indefatigable campaigner against anti-Semitism. She's a journalist too. Nicole, thank you for joining me on the programme. How are you?
All right, thanks for having me on. It's really strange, isn't it? I was actually on talk with you at the moment where they came out with this first lie that they were cancelling it because of the behaviour.
I remember, and you said, I just don't believe it, it's not true.
Yeah, I think I actually said it's a lie.
Yes.
What I didn't expect was that there would be lie upon lie upon lie upon lie. And, you know, we can call it false claims or incorrect information. These are lies, and they lied to all of us. They lied to our MPs, and the lies have continued. And why wouldn't they tell us the truth? Are they afraid to tell us the truth?
Well, exactly. And it just shows that either they are willfully ignorant or that they can be easily misled. And I wonder if the police, who are just so afraid to offend anybody, see what the local MP Ayub Khan was saying, see what he was putting on social media, and then they're told this nonsense and they believe it and they use their security assessment based on incorrect information. Then they go to Parliament on Monday, the Assistant Chief Constable, is a really senior officer here, saying, oh yeah, by the way, these Jewish groups said it was fine. And that's just not true. And we're in a situation, time and time again, the Jewish community and many other people from all sorts of parts of the community as well, just don't trust the police. If they can lie to Parliament, for goodness sake, well, what more will they lie about? What other information are they telling us that's not true? And time again on my programmes, we hear from the police, then later on we find out that what they've told us isn't correct.
Yeah, exactly. They're diminishing their own role in society, and we have to be able to trust the police. And this is just the latest lie, in that they said in Parliament that there were 5,000 police officers involved in Amsterdam. That wasn't true. It was 1,200. And as we know, even without the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in Aston Villa that night, they had 700 fans. That was with no Israeli fans. So what is the real problem? Another piece of information they lied about is they talked about some sort of secret conversation with Amsterdam police that no one took a memo of, bizarrely, which Amsterdam police has denied almost everything in it. They've lied about there was a fictitious match that they've even come up with in Parliament. It's no wonder that quite a few of the MPs said this was completely wrong, or one even called it an evil plot. So we all want to know exactly what the truth is, but can we trust the police to tell us? I'm not sure we can. And that's a depressing state of affairs, isn't it?
It's really, really terrifying, actually, especially when it comes to Jewish people being banned from a football match. Yes, Maccabi Tel Aviv have some thugs, as do many, many, many football teams, but we know that there are police strategies to deal with that. There are police strategies. I mean, police are at all sorts of matches with fans who hate each other all the time. Rangers and Celtic, for goodness sake. Now, it didn't happen for a while, but they're now going to each other's away games and home games and so on as well. So if they can have peaceful matches between those two, they can have a few fans from Maccabi Tel Aviv. And they also said, and lied to us as well, saying that the threat came from Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, when actually what we needed was a proper assessment of the risk from Islamists to the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, and indeed the Aston Villa fans who were going to attend that match as well, Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that they lied about was they said that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans had thrown local Amsterdam residents into the river, which wasn't true. There was one person thrown in a river that was a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan, and the people that threw him out the river wouldn't let him out unless he said Free Palestine. Yeah. So I'm not denying that there is a hooligan element, as there is in almost every football team, and I'm sure there's not some of them are nasty, and yes, they were in the IDF, as almost everybody in Israel has to go into the IDF, but they could have been controlled. The great irony is that 2 weeks later or a week later at Aston Villa, another team was pulling up chairs. So it's not like we in this country can't handle hooliganism or aren't used to it. The threat had always come from a certain community around Aston Villa, not from Aston Villa fans.
Tell me your thoughts on Israel taking part in Eurovision, and the fact that at least 4 countries have said they won't take part, including, surprise, surprise, Ireland.
I've just done a Twitter thread, actually, because an Irish friend got in touch with me about the fact that she thinks that Israel is actually being used as a scapegoat by Ireland. I mean, we know Ireland has lots of problems with anti-Semitism, but also RTE, which funds the Irish trip to Eurovision, is in big financial difficulties, and it's costing them a lot of money each year to send people to Eurovision.
Well, they almost went under in the mid-90s, actually. They had major problems when Ireland kept winning Eurovision. They won it 2 years in a row, and it was staged by RTE, and it cost an awful lot of money to stage the competition. So that is a very, very interesting element of that, Nicole.
Yeah. And these other countries, to me, it just feels like a huge tantrum. They're not getting what they want. They were in Eurovision with Israel over the last 2 years. They often refer to what happened to Russia, but there are 2 key differences. And one is that, of course, that Russia wasn't invaded. It invaded another European country, whereas in Israel's respect, Hamas invaded Israel, and this was a war of defense, not just against Hamas, but also Iran and all its different proxies in Syria and Lebanon and in Iraq, in Yemen, and that for 2 years, rockets and missiles were being hurled at Israel. So they're very different events, but also there's something else that's not really talked about, which is Eurovision is run by a union which looks after national state television for all different countries. They're meant to abide by certain rules. And one reason why they threw Russia out was because the Russian state television was seen as a kind of pravda for Putin, in that it didn't criticize Putin at all, didn't criticize the war. In respect of Israel, Khan, which shows the Eurovision, is very of course it's patriotic, but it regularly
It's a democracy and a free media. Yeah.
So it regularly criticises Netanyahu, and there is a move actually by the right wing of the Israeli government to close Khan down, and there has been for many years. And Eurovision is one reason why it's kept on TV. So that's a kind of another story that's not really talked about.
Well, exactly, and it's a nuance to all of this that will be, of course, forgotten by those who simply hate Israel. Nicole, thank you very much for your analysis, and you were absolutely right at the time that we were on air. You were totally right, as you almost always are. Nicole, thank you. Nicole Lambert there, the journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Lots to discuss in all of this. Lots of people still getting in touch about juries, about state pension and human rights as well. We're also going to talk about Mary Dejevsky in just a second, the international affairs commentator in regard to the Ukraine-Russia peace deal, and the latest on all of that. Stay with us.
Some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the home of common sense.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes in just a second. But I want to talk now about the peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Apparently it's really close. That is, Donald Trump's outgoing Ukraine envoy has said. Keith Kellogg has told the Reagan National Defence Forum efforts to resolve the conflict were in the last 10 metres, which he said are always the hardest. For analysis of this, the best international affairs commentator, especially on Eastern Europe, but just in general, is Mary Dejevsky, who's a foreign affairs columnist with The Independent. Mary, what do you make of this? Great to have you on the programme.
Well, it's very, very interesting. I mean, I can't get too excited about it because, you know, you think we've been here before.
Yeah.
But to have somebody like Keith Kellogg, the retired general, who is within probably days of stepping down as special envoy, as Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, and for him to be talking about it being really, really close, given that he has sort of been regarded as going a bit native towards Ukraine since he was appointed. So if he's saying it's really, really close, then you think that may be possibly from the Ukrainian point of view and therefore more likely to be acceptable.
What is at stake here? I mean, there's so much at stake here, and we know that a city in Ukraine was hit hours after the constructive talks, or the talks that Zelensky said were constructive. Clearly, you know, the war is still going on every single day, and in parallel, this peace agreement is happening. There was a lot of promise, certainly in Anchorage. Will it be realised, is the question, I suppose.
Well, it is the question. What's interesting to me is that Kellogg actually noted two outstanding issues. And, you know, he said the last sort of 10 metres are the most difficult. The two issues he gave were the actual land in the Donbass. And I think that's where, as it were, the border between the Russian occupation, current occupation runs, and the land that Russia wants, which is a bit more than that. Not much more than that, but a bit more than that. The other, which was interesting to me, is control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, because Russia has occupied that since the beginning of the war. But obviously, it's a strategic object of the Ukraine's infrastructure. And you
it's
can
not actually an operation, though, is it? It's not in service, but it's needed to cool things down if needed.
Yes, and the thing is that if you can imagine that in a final settlement that Ukraine would actually want to have to control to revert to Ukraine because it needs it. It needs to put it back into service. So, but the also interesting was what Kellogg didn't mention. And this is one of Russia's biggest red lines, is neutrality or non-NATO membership for Ukraine. And that suggests to me that that may already have been decided.
Interesting. Okay. What do you think the decision will have been?
I think that Ukraine will be neutral. I mean, there's a very interesting sideline on this, that Zelensky's last two foreign visits, aside from his visit to Paris and to London on Monday, were to Ireland and to Cyprus.
Yeah.
And both those are, in a sense, divided countries. And Ireland is particularly interesting because it's neutral. It's a neutral country. It's not in NATO, but it is in the EU.
Yes.
And as such, it's seen as pretty successul. And you can see that in going to those two countries for the first time, maybe Zelensky has been given sort of template examples of how you can be successful while not being in NATO, by being neutral but being in the EU. And those are things that do seem to be on the table.
Fascinating. Mary, thank you. Very much appreciate that. That's Mary Dejevsky there, foreign affairs columnist at The Independent. I want to play 4 voice notes and then I want to get to Tarquin, who is waiting to speak to me. Karen wants to talk about trial without juries. Let's hear what she has said in her voice note.
Hi, Peter. These juries of out of trials, guess what they're going to be used against? People that write hurty words, because I think, the sentence is about 2 to 3 years, isn't it? So you're going to see what's going to happen going forward. They're going to be going after people on social media. And also the auditors on YouTube that go around our streets reporting what's really happening. They are going after them, and it's the iron fist, I'm afraid, taking over, and it's very, very concerning. And how dare he take away our rights to have a trial by jury? How dare he?
Thank you, Karen. Elise has been in touch from Chelmsford. This is her voice note.
With regards to the state pension, it's really important that people go onto the HMRC website and get themselves an account created, because that's where you'll see if you have any gaps in your state pension. When I first did this, I was shocked to see how much longer I had to continue paying my national insurance. Because I worked for the public sector for a large part of my life, my pension was contracted out, which meant I had to pay for longer. So a tip for everyone is to go on the HMRC website and check how many gaps there are in your national insurance contributions. I hope that helps.
Great advice there, Elisa. Thank you. Let's hear about Ray's views on the Human Rights Act.
Hello, Peter. It's Ray from Taunton. Just a quick thing. Why isn't the Human Rights Act used for the greater good of the public, not just the individual involved? And also, why are we still allowing the Islamic Brotherhood in this country, and why hasn't it been prescribed? Because I think it is in most Islamic countries. Thank you.
Totally agree with you that the Muslim Brotherhood should be prescribed immediately. Final voice note of the day, then I promise you we'll get to Tarquin. This is Steve.
Hi, Steve from Manchester. You talk about people who are British citizens perpetuating these crimes of terrorism, but they're not, in most cases, they're not meaningfully British citizens. Their ancestry, their religion, their culture, they're not British. The British come from the Anglo-Saxon route, the Celtic route, and compilations thereof. And these people their ancestry is recent ingress. They retain their culture, their ways, their identity. Of course, they have their own bloodlines. And they do not perceive themselves in any meaningful sense as British. We need to wake up to this.
Steve, thanks for your point. Let's hear a final point from Tarquin in London, who's given me a ring. Tarquin, what would you like to say?
Cardi P, great show, my friend, great show. Just quickly before the show ends, what you said earlier on really rattled me, Peter. I think what it is that if you have a senior police officer in front of the highest court in the land, which is our Parliament, that is the highest court in the land, effectively what that officer has done, in my view, correct me if I'm wrong, is some form of perjury. And of course, that's a misprision act as well in public office.
Well, I'm sure Mike O'Hara would deny that he willfully misled Parliament or willfully misled the Home Affairs Commission, but he said things that were not true and has apologised for that.
Well, I think an apology is that if he can get away with that, he'll be doing well. I think that.
Should he keep his job, Tarquin?
Well, I'd need to see a little bit more of the evidence personally, but on the face of it, prima facie, it does not look good.
Okay.